Amen. If you'll join us in this Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item this morning is the adoption of the agenda. I will note that Commissioner Renee Cahoon is not present. She is in the Far East enjoying a well-deserved vacation. Entertain a motion for approval of the approval of the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. This is the time of the morning that we set aside for audience response. I'd like to open the floor to anybody who would like to come up. If you'll give us your name and address, and please come to the podium so we can capture everybody's comments. Oh.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Marvin Demers, 8819 South Old Oregon Inlet Road. I just wanted to make a quick comment and a couple of observations from my perspective down in South Nags Head about the recycle program. As I think most everybody knows, the pilot program for this calendar year has just come to an end at the end of September. My observation is that it wasn't a perfect pilot, but no pilots are, I don't think, but it was quite effective in our area. It was a great relief to see a lot of items that tourists typically use in recycled bins and being picked up by the contractor. And kudos to the town, sanitation, and the contractor for both picking up their own cans, not picking up each other's, ignoring the cans that were out there on the wrong days and things like that. I think it worked pretty well from a general sense. I think there were some things that need to be improved. There should be a lot of lessons learned from the staff, the sanitation department, and the contractor, and the public. And so I think there's a lot of benefit to the town and to the Outer Banks for having a good and effective recycle program. And I think it ought to be looked at very carefully, see what improvements we can make. And hopefully at one point we'll be able to have a universal recycle program for the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demers.
Ask anybody who's on the phone. He was up at the top.
It's going to be one of those days, huh?
Trying to get my strength back.
Good morning, I'm Peregrine White, and I live on Villadunas Drive in Nags Head. I'd like to echo Mr. Demers' remarks on recycling and say that I noticed the same thing on the north end of the beach road. Recycling cans filled to overflowing almost every morning when I came down the road. Even before people moved out, the recycled stuff was in the cans. The second thing I'd like to speak on this morning is the item number 4 under your consent agenda. It is a huge increase in the amount of language in the mitigation plan, and I'm hoping that it will be posted not only on the web page, but also have copies for people to be able to read that do not have internet capability at the to pick up either at the library or at the town hall. The third thing I'd like to speak to this morning is to call your attention to the memo to Bob Oakes from Mark Cornwell, a citizen in Lone Cedar Village. I doubt if most of the people in the audience or on TV have been able to see it, especially his second paragraph, the reduction of the 45 miles an hour from the east end of the bridge to the first stoplight encountered at Tanger Mall. The area near Tanger Mall at one time, unless my memory is totally faulty, was down around 45. This is before we put a common speed limit of 50 miles an hour all the way down the bypass. That, second suggestion, his second suggestion I would request is what you would put in your resolution today. 55 to 40 miles an hour is a great speed reduction. In my teaching classes for AARP, for senior drivers especially, they have a problem with huge changes in speed limits. I would actually suggest that we have a short section from the town line on the bridge of 50 posted. Then 45 at the end of the bridge up to at least the Whalebone intersection pair of stoplights. Whalebone intersection, if you listen to the fire dispatch, on many days has a plethora of wrecks. They're not all serious, but I've been on a few where the light poles and guardrails and everything else there have been taken out by cars that are at too high a speed. And that's probably, I don't know that 45 versus 50 is going to slow down somebody doing 75, but I think posting the 45. It's also, the road over to Jeunesse Pier is 25. So we are going from 50 to 25, a halving of the speed of the people driving. The less, in my experience as a driver instructor, the less abrupt speed changes that people find, the better. I also brought along with me some examples of car braking distance. At 60 miles an hour, and I realize this is a little slower than 55, but most of the cars coming across that bridge are not doing 55, they're doing 60 and above. It takes a Chevy Blazer 158 feet to panic stop from 60 miles an hour. I said panic stop. That's not the normal stop. This is an emergency stop. But even to me scarier, we talk about a 1,000-foot marking to the crosswalk of the warning sign. A tractor trailer truck loaded with hot brakes in a panic stopping. God help us if we have a tractor trailer loaded with hot brakes trying to do a panic stop on that highway. 430 feet, nearly one half the distance that we have warning of that crosswalk. So I would urge you to think about this when you consider your resolution today. I think Mr. Cornwall's ideas are, especially his second paragraph, is a step we can do in getting this down to a safer place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White.
I'm Richard Murphy at 8817 South Oregon Inlet Road. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and fellow commissioners. You may recall in the workshop that Perry just mentioned, the speed limit coming across the little bridge and what we're going to do about the crosswalk. And you may recall one of the suggestions that I made, and you may want to consider that in your resolution. Instead of having a flashing light that flashes all the time, have it pedestrian activated flashing light, as well as having the sign, the diamond sign with the lights flashing around it. Certainly reducing the speed limit is going to help, but I think if we have just a caution light that flashes all the time, from past experience, and it appeared that everybody in the workshop with DOT also agreed that after a while, people just don't pay any attention to the flashing light. So you may want to consider that. Secondly, one thing I've observed in all the meetings that I've been to over the last couple of years, that has always been very refreshing, that's on the occasions that we have a pastor to start the service with a prayer. I would like for the commissioners to consider, even if we don't have pastors, we have enough citizens that would probably be willing to say a prayer to open our ceremonies. Obviously, we can all, in making decisions for the city, we can all seek and should seek, and in a lot of cases need divine intervention to help us understand and make good decisions. And I just think it would be very refreshing for us to go back to that before we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Anybody else to speak to us this morning? Anybody at all? We're going to close our public comment then. Thank you all very much for speaking. We generally don't respond at this point in time, but we will look at responding later in the meeting, if that's all right. The next item on our agenda is a time-specific item, and I hope everybody will be here at 10 o'clock. We're looking at the retirement of beach driving permit number 1 in honor of former Town Commissioner Ronnie Scott. Recognition? Let's see. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the Board of Commission. I'm very happy today to introduce Mr. Mark Stripp. He is an intern that comes from us, originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, but is now in his 3rd year at UNC Chapel Hill, double majoring in economics and environmental studies. Mark is working with planning on a variety of topics as part of the internship program with the UNC Chapel Hill Environment at the Coastal Studies Institute, UNC Institute for the Environment at the Coastal Studies Institute. This is our 4th intern that we've worked with in the planning department as part of that program. We've had a tremendous success with this program, getting as much work out of these folks as we possibly can. Mark has been working with us on an inventory of empty storefronts, looking at park design options, distribution of the septic health magnets, and also we're pulling him into the stormwater manual draft development process and other administrative tasks and planning tasks that we can find for him, which are easy to find in our department. Mark is an effective worker, and we're very happy to have you on the planning and development team. So welcome, Mark. He'll be here with us through November.
Wonderful. Welcome aboard, Mark. Glad to have you.
Nice to meet you.
We're going to work you hard, but you can get some valuable experience.
Welcome aboard. Have a good time too while you're there. Okay.
Hey, Mark, I'm John White. It's nice to meet you.
Me too.
Welcome, pleasure.
Thank you.
That's yeah, interesting.
Chief?
Good morning, Mayor, Board of Commissioners. It's my privilege to come before you today to introduce to you our newest police officer. Jason, if you come forward. Jason Greiner. Jason is originally from Pennsylvania. He graduated from Old Dominion University, where he was on scholarship to play baseball, received his bachelor's degree in criminal justice. After moving to our area, he attended the Basic Law Enforcement Training Academy at College of the Albemarle, where he was his class president and graduated this past spring. He's been with us now for about 6 or 7 weeks, so we're certainly glad that he's here. Jason is a busy person, not only doing his training here, but he's also father to a 4-week-old daughter named Kyler. So if you remember, he was not able to come last time because the birth was happening. So we're certainly glad that he's here today, and Jason brings a lot to our department. We're certainly glad to have him as a part of our team.
Jason, glad to have you. Let's get some sleep.
Good luck and congratulations on the new addition.
Thank you. Yeah, congratulations. Thanks, sir.
Just left Pittsburgh, Wexford, suburb.
Good luck.
Thank you, sir. Welcome. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Flowers may be on some folks' agendas, but he is, his mother is ill. He's not here, and he will be here on November to be recognized. Our next item is a Fire Prevention Week proclamation.
Good morning, Mayor,
Chief.
Commissioner. If I may speak just a minute about Fire Prevention Week.
As you all know, annually Fire Prevention Week is celebrated throughout the nation from Sunday, October 6th through Saturday, October 12th. The fire department this year will, of course, be participating in our annual Fire Prevention Open House on Tuesday night, October the 8th, which we hope that all of you will be able to attend. We have events for children and adults as well this year, and we'll have food, of course, and a lot of good events. The guys have really put a lot of effort in it, and we really hope for a big turnout. We'll also be providing education in the schools this year, in Nags Head Elementary School, as well as assisting some of the other departments in the county with their schools. So we're hoping for a really big week and a really good turnout for our Fire Prevention Night. So we hope everyone can attend.
Thank you, sir. I'm
Yes,
going to
sir.
read our proclamation, the Town of Nags Head 2013 Fire Prevention Week proclamation. Whereas the Town of Nags Head is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our town, whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire, and whereas home fires killed more than 2,500 people in the United States in 2011, according to the National Fire Protection Association, and fire departments in the United States responded to 370,000 home fires. And whereas cooking is the leading cause of home fires in the United States, where fire departments responded to more than 156,000 fires annually between 2007 and 2011, whereas 2 of every 5 home fires start in the kitchen, and whereas unattended equipment was a factor in 1/3 of the reported cooking fires, and whereas 57% of reported non-fatal home cooking fire injuries occurred when victims tried to fight fire themselves, and whereas children under 5 face a higher risk of non-fire burns associated with cooking than being burned in a cooking fire, and whereas Town of Nags Head residents should stay in the kitchen when frying food on the stovetop, keep a 3-foot kid-free zone around cooking areas, and keep anything that can catch fire away from stovetops. And whereas residents who have planned and practiced a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire, and whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half, and whereas Town of Nags Head first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education, and whereas Town of Nags Head residents are responsive to public education measures and are able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes, and whereas the 2013 Fire Prevention Week theme, Prevent Kitchen Fires, effectively serves to remind us to stay alert and use caution when cooking to reduce the risk of kitchen fires. Therefore, I, Bob Oakes, Mayor, Town of Nags Head, do hereby proclaim October 6th through the 12th, 2013, as Fire Prevention Week. I urge all the citizens of Nags Head to protect their families by checking their kitchens for fire hazards and using safe cooking practices during Fire Prevention Week 2013, and to support the many public safety activities and efforts of the Town of Nags Head Fire and Rescue Department. Further, I invite the entire community to attend the National Fire Prevention Week Youth Night on Tuesday, October the 8th, 2013, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Nags Head Fire Station 16. This the second day of October. And I'll move for approval.
Move to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I didn't ask for nays, but I don't think there were
I don't
any.
think you have any.
Thank you, Shane.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Our next proclamation this week is a Big Sweep proclamation. This is a proclamation of the Board of Commissioners of the Town of Nags Head declaring October 12th, 2013 as Town of Nags Head Big Sweep 2013 Day. Whereas the Town of Nags Head is rich in natural resources and beauty, and whereas water is a basic and essential need for all life, and whereas trash fouls our waterways as well as our landscapes, and whereas every citizen should contribute to keeping our environment clean and healthy by working together to preserve clean water and the natural beauty of our surroundings, and whereas North Carolina Big Sweep is a statewide community effort to retrieve trash from North Carolina's waterways and landscapes, and whereas during its first 25 years, North Carolina Big Sweep volunteers have retrieved over 10 million pounds of debris from our environment, including tires, white goods, and other solid waste. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners of the Town of Nags Head, North Carolina, meeting on October 2nd, 2013, does hereby declare October 12th, 2013 as Town of Nags Head Big Sweep 2013 Day in Dare County, and does further hereby urge every citizen to do his or her part to restore the beauty and function of our lakes and streams by volunteering to participate in the annual Big Sweep event. Now entertain a motion for the proclamation.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Mayor, do you think it might be good for the public to know where, if they have questions about the bags and where to start and where to end, to give them Scott's email address or his contact information? I have it.
Please do.
It's outerbanks@surfrider.org. That's Scott Lawrence. Well, I just did it.
No, that's good. Thank you.
So,
And I will tell you, I'm going to take my canoe down to our South Nags Head ditch and see what we can do about moving some of the trash out of there. Seems to be a collection spot for it. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. The next item is our consent agenda.
Move to adopt as presented.
second?
We have a motion and a second. I do want to make a note under further discussion, that we are renewing our town manager's contract. And I feel like we're very fortunate in having Cliff as a town manager. He's grown an awful lot since he's taken the job, and I feel like he provides a great continuity to our town, and I personally hope to see him here for many more years. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Don't let it go to your head, sir.
Yes, sir.
Our next item today is a public hearing. It's a public hearing to consider adoption of a zoning ordinance text amendment submitted by Bradley Carey to amend Town Code Section 48-445D1B to permit a new use of aerial adventure park within the commercial outdoor recreation overlay district.
All right, we'll begin the public hearing to consider this proposed text amendment at this time. In this matter, the board sits as a legislative body. That means that no sworn testimony is required, but we will begin the presentation of this with the staff's analysis presented by Kelly Wyatt.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Bradley Carey has submitted the zoning ordinance text amendment to allow a new use within the commercial outdoor recreation overlay. It's going to be an aerial adventure park. Aerial adventure parks offer combinations of elements associated with high ropes courses such as rope and wire bridges, nets, balance challenges, and obstacles including zip lines. With that being said, staff believes this is the appropriate district, being the recreation overlay, for this use to be proposed in. The amendment to Town Code Section 48-445D1B sets forth the following conditions. Lot size must be a minimum of 1 acre. Structural poles greater than 35 feet in height shall be set back a minimum of 1.1 times the height from all property lines and rights-of-ways. In your staff packet, I believe they're called utility poles, and we've had a recommendation to change that from utility to structural poles, just so there's no confusion. No portion of the park, including the structural poles, shall exceed 70 feet in height. The 70 feet was recommended by the planning board. We pulled that from the distinction between minor and major communication towers. 70 feet and less is considered a minor communication tower. 70 feet and greater is major communication tower. Like this board heard for the outdoor amusements, they're at full throttle. There's also a condition that where a mature vegetative buffer of 10 feet in height does not currently exist, a fence, a privacy fence of opaque material 10 feet in height shall be installed along any property boundary abutting a residential use or a residential district. Additionally, we've included a condition that any course shall be compliant with ACCT standards. That's the Association for Challenge Course Technology. And our applicant, Brad Carey, could probably tell you everything you want to know about ACCT certification. At the time the planning board heard this request, a definitive parking standard had not been proposed. The planning board recommended that the parking subcommittee, which was going to be meeting shortly thereafter, take this under consideration and come up with an adequate parking standard. The committee met on September 24th, and they did propose a parking standard that's based upon the number of elements within the park. There was a lot of discussion on this, and Planning Director Elizabeth T. can go into much greater detail here shortly about how we came to the parking standard that's being proposed. This is a unique use. It has a limited amount of land disturbance, relatively low environmental impacts by design, and it takes advantage of the existing landscape. The use would be a new type of outdoor recreation and education entertainment to this area. It's family-oriented, it's great for groups, team building exercises, and it will accommodate a variety of ages and physical abilities. In your packet, you had several links to other aerial adventure parks, both in North Carolina and elsewhere. Based upon our review, planning staff recommends adoption of the proposed amendment, which would establish this new use within the Commercial Outdoor Recreation Overlay District. At their September 17th meeting, the planning board also voted unanimously to recommend adoption of the text amendment with those conditions about the maximum height of the structural poles being 70 feet and the installation of a privacy fence adjacent to residential uses and districts. Staff would go ahead and note that, as proposed, this is a conditional use. So should this text amendment be adopted, any site plan is coming back before the planning board and this board for review and approval as well. So, happy to answer any questions. If not, Ms. T can go ahead and address the parking regulation.
All right, does the board have any questions for Ms. Wyatt? Mr. Mayor?
I looked like I was going to speak that much. 3 questions. About any idea about how many poles we're talking about? I mean, typically on a communications tower, you get one that covers a pretty wide area. Are we talking about 50 of these or
Well,
5?
we're not at the site plan stage.
I understand.
And Mr. Carey might be able to answer that. Preliminarily, I believe there's 2 proposed at 70 feet, and I'm sure there's some that will be less. But as far as the 70 feet in height, I think it's 2 that's currently proposed.
And I guess my follow-up question was how essential is the 70 feet to that? Is that an integral part of it? Is 50 feet something that would be acceptable as well, or was the...
I would suggest that we address that particular question to Mr. Carey, the applicant.
One final question. The use of the ACCT standards, I've looked over them a little bit, but are there other situations where the town uses somebody else's standards in the ordinance?
Yes, and we had some communications with our town attorney on that point. We were trying to, at Mr. Carey's suggestion, include a standard, an industry standard that is accepted among these types of courses. And the industry standard covers not just construction, but maintenance, operations, safety, standards of equipment. In terms of your question, the one additional sort of reference that we use is to state building codes. Of course, that is developed by the State Building Code Council and is widely accepted. This is one of 2 accreditation structures in the United States and one of 7 internationally. So the staff would feel it's acceptable if you wanted to remove the ACCT specification in the ordinance. But what we'd like to suggest is that rather than removing it altogether, to say something similar to what's proposed here, which would be, shall be compliant with Association for Challenge Course Technology standards or similar or more stringent standards, so that we're not just accepting that, but something in addition. And Mr. Carey can again speak to that. Our purpose here was not to delegate authority, because all of these will have to comply with our local building codes and state building codes, as well as our local fire and emergency management codes. None of that changes. However, what we did want to do is make sure that we had a reference to not anyone can just come in and build a zip line. That in addition to all our local standards, there are some industry standards that we would like to see adopted. So however you want to work with that, we will work with you on.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Wyatt or Ms. Teague? Yes, ma'am.
Elizabeth, are you going to go through the parking standards that you have
Yes,
come up?
ma'am.
Because I might have a question, I think,
Okay.
there. Okay, well, I'll just wait.
At Mr. Carey's suggestion at the initial application, it made sense to establish a parking standard based on the number of elements in a course. An element being the activity that happens between posts or poles. So for example, I think a lot of people are familiar with the idea of a zip line, but it's not just zip lines. An element could be a challenge to get across a swinging bridge from post to post. It could be to walk across a high wire. It's different sort of problem-solving challenges from post to post that constitute an element. In terms of the function of the course, generally you'd only have one person on an element at a time, and perhaps you might have one person waiting. Based on the industry standard, they felt like only 10 to 20% of people, 10 to 20% of an entire course may be used at any one time, and generally they're going to hope to have a reservation type of system where someone would actually plan ahead to come to the course. At the same time, they do want to market to groups, particularly school groups or church groups, maybe corporate groups or for team building and such, particularly during the off-season. So the challenge in the parking standard was to create enough parking that could serve both sort of a large vehicle during the shoulder season, but also to accommodate the usage, the suspected usage of the course moving forward. We also looked at similar types of parking standards in our ordinance now as they relate to outdoor amusements. And we gravitated towards this idea of one parking space per 3 amusement ride seats. And it's kind of a similar thing that makes sense in this application, because you might have a parent driving a child, say, to a driver in the car, and then 1 to 3 participants on the course. And if you have one participant on any element at any given time, then that 1 to 3 ratio seems to make sense in a parking standard. So you'll see here what we've said is 1 parking space per 3 elements within the course. So, for example, the kind of working model we have based on their business plan is if they were to install a course of 60 elements, you'd have 20 required parking spaces, plus a fixed number of spaces allocated towards employees. And based on, again, Mr. Carey's business plan, he was thinking he'd need to have 8 people there at any one time. So we allocated 4 parking spaces for employees. That's how the parking standard was derived by the parking subcommittee. At that point, we actually got Mr. Carey on the phone as part of that meeting. He concurred with this analysis that made a lot of sense to him. This gives us some room to work with in the site planning process. When he comes back with his actual site plan, we can look at the particulars of what's available on that site and any shared parking opportunities that may be available. The other item about having this number of parking spaces is that it does allow in the off-season, when maybe you don't have as many individual users, but maybe you have a church van, it would allow for use of a larger parking space for a bus or something to turn around in. So there was some thought and discussion about that as well. I'm happy to answer any questions about that parking standard as proposed.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am?
This is a, if I remember somewhere reading, this is a daytime into the late afternoon, before dark use. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm not being site-specific here, but are you allowing for any shared parking?
Yes, the parking standard already allows for shared parking, particularly in the C2 district, which
Right.
underlies the overlay, recreational overlay. You can get a credit up to 50% of the required parking for a shared parking arrangement. So depending on the site plan that's brought in, we will look for every opportunity for shared parking where it makes sense.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Just a final comment, this parking standard came out of the parking subcommittee and is presented to you in the ordinance. However, if you would like the planning board to work more formally on that parking ordinance, we can kick that section back without holding up the process of this applicant, if you would desire. Does that make sense? In other words, we're expecting him to come back with a site plan to you at the next month meeting, so we can go back and revisit this parking standard with the formal planning board between now and then.
All right, more questions about the parking standard or the other components of this text amendment? Any at all? All right. Thank you, Mrs. Teague. All right, anything from the applicant on this?
Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. I have a slideshow to show that has a few pictures in it that we can use to kind of gain a better understanding of what an aerial park is. Go to the next slide. So to understand what an aerial park is, as Ms. Teague said, it's similar to a ropes course. They're kind of bred out of ropes courses, which promote education, team building, personal development, and problem solving. Outward Bound was most notorious for using them at first. Now you can see that basically all universities, schools in this country and around the world have them. Also, our military uses them to train soldiers. With the same skills that they use to teach students, that traditional ropes courses teach students. This is an example of an aerial park. The biggest difference between an aerial park and a ropes course is that there's not a facilitator, so the participants are either permanently clipped in to a belay or there's a continuous belay system, both of which they're consistently clipped in and safe throughout the course. This is examples of continuous belay systems. It allows ropes courses to be used in a more commercial aspect by allowing more people to go through them per day. The next question is how this will benefit Nags Head. It's family oriented. It can be used in the summer for the tourists to give them something to do, and in the off seasons it can be used for school groups and corporate groups. Can we go to the next slide? It looks cool. It shows off the environment and has a little footprint. It's environmentally friendly to build and to operate. So, as we said, it's basically a glorified pier. The main structure are utility poles or structured poles sunk into the sand. Qualified to do this because I've been building these for 11 years. Where I've been building ropes courses and challenge courses, towers, you name it, zip line courses. My company is my boss is on the board for ACCT, And we've been a member since the start of ACCT. My boss actually had the very first meeting in his house. Me and Abby have lived here. We want to build one here in Nags Head, obviously. We think that Nags Head promotes our same values as stewards of the environment and healthy lifestyles of the people. We're young entrepreneurs with a vision to show off more of Nags Head's natural beauty and have fun doing it. We want to hire local people and promote a new venture in Nags Head. So I think this is an exciting thing that we're doing right now. And we look forward to hopefully getting it passed. So thank you for your attention, and can answer any specific questions about the heights that you might have or any other parking
Yes,
issues.
are there questions for Mr. Carey?
How essential is that 70-foot height on your poles?
The biggest poles that you can get realistically are 90 feet. So 10 feet in the ground is 80 feet high. So, but those are very, very expensive, and then they're still expensive at 70 or 80 feet. But you have to have the 10 feet in the ground, so that takes up some space. But you know, you're only born with two fears: fear of heights and fear of loud noises. So a ropes course it's important for it to be high in order to kind of get the adrenaline going and to be useful as a self growing kind of thing to challenge people, basically, mentally and physically. So how important is it that it has to be 70 feet? That's hard to say. You know, 50 feet, 60 feet probably would be fine too. It's really up to you guys.
And it looked like there were maybe 10 to 20 poles involved in something like this. Is that?
Yeah, it depends. See, the higher you go, the more levels you can have on a certain pole, the more courses can come into a single pole. So by having it higher, it can be more compact. So that's really the main thing that you lose. So it all depends. Probably around 27 poles, I would say, would be a fairly average course. 60 elements is average. They have courses that are 120. You know, if you get down to about the 30 area, it's not really big enough to be considered an aerial park, to invest in the technology of the continual belay systems. So there, 60 is still, it's average right now, but as they grow in this country, I think that they'll start to get bigger as the competition starts to get higher.
Well, I can tell you, I'm every bit as scared at 50 feet as I am at 70 feet.
Mayor Pro Tem, did you have a question?
You are Bradley Carey, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Carey, you talked about zip line. I haven't seen anything about, I haven't seen the zip line in your proposal here.
A zip line's a small part of an aerial park. There's maybe 1 or 2 zip lines on a course. Every element is unique and different. So when you come up on a specific element, you're faced with a new challenge of how to get across. And one of the things that I'd like to do that I don't think has ever been done is have a few elements that are team-oriented, where it takes 2 people to get through. Those are becoming more popular in ropes courses, but I think that there's a way that we can do it on an aerial park as well.
That was one question. My second question and last one is, somewhere, I keep looking for it, I thought I read something here that this is acceptable over marshy areas. Is that right?
Over marshy areas. Yeah, the Army Corps of Engineering has given us the okay on using that what is considered to be a unusable land. So it kind of opens up a few other spots.
Thanks, sir.
Welcome.
Yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Carey, I think I saw a tower
Mm-hmm.
in your slideshow. What is the height of that tower?
I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but we've built towers. I mean, towers can be any size from 35 feet to 70 feet. So,
Roberta, the picture of the two guys on
It's,
at the very
it's,
beginning.
keep going.
Okay, that's-
Well, that was
That's
not
not
the
it.
one I was talking
not
about.
it.
It's still further back.
Is it down there?
Mm-mm. There it is, on the left, lower.
Bottom left corner.
So that can be any height?
that could be 70 feet, yes.
Thank you, that's all I had.
Any other questions for Mr. Carey? All right, thank you very much. Anything else before you step down?
No.
All right,
Thank
thank you very much. All right, yes, Mrs. Teague.
I did want to make a clarification comment regarding to height that came up in the planning board meeting, which was the posts that are used for these structures are at varying height. And usually what happens is you'll have one or two main towers, as Mr. Carey was explaining, that may be the highest. So you sort of start with a 70-foot tower and then work your way down to different elements. Something that the planning board discussed but chose not to really go to is you could even limit the number of structures over a certain height if you wanted to allow at least one structure that was, say, 70 feet, but you didn't want to allow many structures. What we did in the planning board level was just put a general cap at 70 feet, similar to the minor cell tower requirement, and also just to try and give him some flexibility to work within that. But an additional standard that the board might choose to limit the number of those structures is an option for you, and just wanted to make sure you understood that. Another reminder is the other thing that we looked at the planning board was the Ferris wheel guidelines, and that was up to 60 feet. So we already have some precedent there for recreational structures that are a little bit taller than our normal height standard.
Thank you, Ms. Teague. All right, does any member of the public wish to comment on this proposed text amendment? Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, I'm Louis Toth. Yesterday I was walking around my neighborhood, which is in the Bay Meadow section of the village, and I counted the number of houses that are still for rentals, and it's less than half. More people are retiring here, or it's their second home. And I look at this structure over here, and I think it's extremely ugly. You ask how many poles and whatnot. It's going to do nothing for this trend where people are going to stop renting and start living here. As they do that, I think property values will start going up more than what they are now. My second point is, I'm fortunate enough to have a co-op in New York City, and I was able to buy the place with my wife because we had a climbing wall in an atrium, large ceiling. It had a lot of athletic people coming every day, sometimes, and a hell of a lot of homeless people. We fought like heck to get rid of that climbing wall, and today we got Lincoln Center in that space, and my property values have doubled. I think if you go with this thing, you're going to have a lot of traffic, accidents, but it's just ugly. Okay, so I'm opposed to it. I don't understand why you even think about this thing. It's a community, Nags Head, which is attracting people like me who want to stay here, live here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toth. Any other member of the public wish to comment? Yes, sir.
Berg and White again. One of the first slides he showed there was the outward bound. My son is probably well improved after he graduated from high school. We sent him to an outward bound course, and it has shaped his entire life. The other thing is that the Sheriff's Department has reinstituted their tower for youth, which was laid waste for about 8 years, but under Sheriff Doty has been redone, and it's a tremendous success. That's not near us. I think you should consider the fact that this type of facility will be great for our youth, even if it isn't great for the people that are my age. Although I'd love to be able to go up on that tower and see the rest of Nags Head. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Any other comments from the public? If anyone else wishes to comment, this is your chance. Does the board wish to receive any further information on this matter? Did you have a question for Ms. Teague?
I did.
Ms. Sadler? Ms. Teague, if you'll come back up, please.
Elizabeth, this is a conditional use situation.
Yes.
And would you tell the board and the audience where, we're not being site-specific for this particular gentleman, where this might occur in Nags Head?
Yes, as proposed, this would be a conditional use that is added to the list of conditional uses within the commercial recreational overlay district. That district covers the causeway to the west side of US 158, including Windmill Point, up to Forbes Street or so. And I believe we have a map in the agenda packet that we can show. The idea of a conditional use is that you're creating a use that's not allowed outright. For a conditional use, before someone is allowed to actually begin business or to construct anything, they have to come back through the Planning Board and the Board of Commissioners with a site plan that's very specific as to what they want to do, where, and how. And so in a conditional use situation, there's an opportunity for the community to provide input and to exact conditions. If this use is to go into this site, we're going to ask you to do some additional things above and beyond for the purpose of health, safety, and welfare. So a conditional use, for example, allows the board an opportunity to look at traffic impacts, noise impacts, light impacts, additional setbacks, environmental issues that may pertain to a particular site. Here in our recreational overlay district, which covers the sound, this was an area set aside in our land use plan for the promotion of outdoor recreation. It already holds a lot of kayak and boat rentals, as well as, jet skis is a very popular one. But also, you'll see there businesses that interact with the sound waters. In recent discussion of the Board of Commissioners, there was actually concern brought forward about wanting to preserve this area for recreational uses and to try and avoid the possibility of a big box store going in there. In terms of rather, we'd like to see those directed elsewhere in the C2 district, but to try and preserve this area for recreation and to preserve those views and access and interaction with the sound. As I mentioned previously, this is where the Windmill Point event site is going to be placed. The Tourism Board is looking at a master plan for that site that includes several trails and sort of areas for special events. And so staff's opinion on this particular text amendment, as you'll see in the site in the staff report, is that this use is very appropriate to this overlay district. It is a brand-new recreational use, not just to the town, but to the Outer Banks area. So it has the potential to be an economic driver, which would bring people from the outside into the town of Nags Head to spend money here. I would foresee a group coming in, say from out of town, doing the course and then going out for lunch or going out for dinner. So a particular use like this, where it's unique to the area and it has a high profile and sort of a wow factor, if you would, can actually have a wide community economic benefit. So we feel as a staff that this is a great opportunity for the town, and we're in full support of this text amendment.
Just for those who might be listening and not watching, I know you said it goes, this is the recreational overlay district in the C.
The underlying district is C2.
Right, and it goes from the Causeway to Forbes Street. Can you, for the audience that is listening, can you tell them what's north of Forbes Street and what is south of Forbes Street, just so that they have in their mind that this is not adjacent to the Outer Banks Mall or further north?
Yeah, well, north of Forbes Street, you have a residential neighborhood. This overlay district essentially captures what's now the Nags Head Speedway. Several restaurants, Pamlico Jack's, Sugar Creek, way down to Sugar Creek, Miller's Restaurant, and those wide open lots that we have there on the the west side of US 158, adjacent to the Sound. The reason why those lots are so big, it should be noted, is that there's a tremendous amount of estuarine and wetland area. Another benefit of this particular use is, as Mr. Carey mentioned, contacts with CAMA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers about the impacts of this kind of construction on a wetland are acceptable to those agencies. So the idea of putting in some posts in some wetlands to sustain one of these types of elements that we've been talking about would be acceptable and approved by CAMA. So it's a way for these particular estuarine sort of lots to get maximum use of an area that right now we're really not using, and rightfully so, because we want to protect the wetland. But this is one kind of unique use where you maybe could encroach on that wetland area and get a business benefit back out of that land.
Last question. You mentioned in the documents that this conditional use would require the use of at least minimum 1 acre. Does that include both uplands and wetlands, Elizabeth?
Yes, as written, it includes both uplands and wetlands, but for the accessory needs to any particular use, parking, buildings, those all must be reserved on wetland and upland areas. So really, 1 acre would be a minimum size, but we'd project that you'd need really more than that to do a park with a significant number of elements.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Walters?
I have a question about the 70-foot limit, because we have a 60-foot limit within our town for other commercial structures. Do you see that as opening the door for any other structures within the town, or?
Well, this is such a unique type of use. And the height limit that's being proposed is being proposed just for aerial park. So I suppose if somebody else wanted to come in and do a zip line or something on another piece of property, it would open up that door. I do think that the 70-foot sort of maximum tower that you might have, based on what I've seen from these other, we gave you some links to some of these parks around the country, you will end up with 1 or 2 towers like that, and then everything else would graduate down from there. In terms of precedents for other uses outside of the recreational overlay, I can't foresee that, and I would say that the board, any subsequent text amendment, the board would have that opportunity to have a similar discussion to what we're having here and determine what's appropriate and where. As Mr. Carey said, it sounds to me like he can be flexible in the design of his elements. So if you wanted to come down from that 70-foot recommendation to a 60-foot, that would put you on the same level as the Ferris wheel, for example, that would make sense. Again, you have the option to maybe limit the number of structures at a certain height. So I think there are some options for you that we can work with you on for this particular ordinance, if you desire.
May I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you see this as setting a precedent or a challenge that could be brought forward by anyone that wanted to build another structure 70 feet in height, perhaps not within this district, but another commercial area?
I don't have a real concern about that. I think this is a unique type of use. I think the type of structures that would reach this height are relatively, would have a narrow type of footprint, as opposed to any other kind of structure which is going to have a larger footprint. So I feel that there's a pretty good rational basis that the town would have. That's the standard. Is there a rational basis for this standard versus another? And I think there is a rational basis. I agree with Ms. Teague that I think it would be some other type of similar use, such as a zip line course or something else that had just a single, pier or piling type of structure to it. It would be difficult to justify different limitations on those, I think. But for this type of fixed, very narrow structure, I think it'd be easy to justify that on that basis.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions for her? If not, I know that Mr. Demers from the Planning Board wishes to make a comment as well.
Marvin Demers, Vice Chairman of the Planning Board. I just thought it worthy to mention briefly the Planning Board as a whole's interest in this topic, and very glad to see the level of interest and the depth of questions that are coming out here. Mm-hmm. The Planning Board unanimously supported this recommendation, and the primary reasoning behind it dealt with several factors, such as this is a business-friendly opportunity for the town. One of our tenets is to be business-friendly, and at the same time, we want to be supportive and encourage the use and participation by the residents in general for those businesses. This seemed to fit both of those categories. It's a new idea. It may bring in a lot of activity and business and resources to the town. At the same time, you can view the structures in different ways. Some people may feel that this is unattractive. At the same time, compared to other options that could be incorporated here, such as some of the larger opaque structures, this does leave an open view to the sound. It is kind of an eye-catching attraction, should be somewhat encouraging to the public and the tourist community as they're coming down through the town to see that, be interested in it, want to come to it and use it. Also, there's the employment aspect of it. You have the construction, plus you have the instructors and facilitators. So there just seem to be benefits in many aspects to this. And the Planning Board was very enthusiastic about it and unanimously did recommend it come to you. Be happy to answer any questions you might have for the Planning Board.
Any questions for Mr. Demers?
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Walters, did you have a question? Okay. Before you do, I know that there's a question for Mr. Carey, so let's address that first.
Mr. Carey, I think you heard Elizabeth say that in the most recent change that we made in that overlay district was to allow a Ferris wheel. Mm-hmm. And I believe she said that one structure is allowed up to 60 feet and the remaining are still at the 35-foot height. What would let's see, how can I phrase? What would be the downside if your tower structures were no higher than 35 feet?
35 feet doesn't really get you all that high to see your surrounding areas. And 35 feet is kind of like standing on top of a roof. It's not really that high once you get up there. Basically, we can only have 2 elements on a pole that's that high. That's about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Carey? All right, thank you. Yes, sir, Mr. Murphy.
As everyone's aware, I too am a member of the planning board. We spent a great deal of time discussing this, and a point of clarification that the commissioners and mayor needs to understand is this is a conditional use permit, and I'm quite sure when he comes back with the plan, the planning board will peruse and go through height limits, go through the layout, the aesthetic looks of it before it comes back to you for approval. You know, so that's really important. I think we were very excited about something like this occurring in Nags Head, and but there again, we want to make sure it's conducive with our environment, and we all should be stewards of our environment, and meaning not only the wetlands but our community. You know, so I'm quite sure that we will do a lot of studying once it's brought back, you know, before a park like this is actually approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear from Mr. Toth next. If you'll go to the podium, please, so we can make sure we pick up your comments.
Yeah, in my experience with a climbing wall, there's a lot of lighting. Now, if people could be walking at this thing and the sun starts going down, what's the lighting going to be? And why do you have, if it's so safe and aesthetic, do you have a 10-foot wall against anything residential? So can you answer those questions?
The 10-foot wall, if you look at something, I don't know why, there's only one 10-foot, one residential.
That requirement actually came from the existing buffer requirement that we have between commercial uses and residential uses. And we're trying to make sure that this use was consistent with other amusement park uses. If you've driven along the bypass and seen the amusement park, we required them where the vegetative buffer was sort of diminished to put up a 10-foot wall along the residential street. The issue here is really just to separate a use like this from a residential neighborhood. It's not for separation between business communities. So if this were located on the edge of the overlay district, we'd want some buffering. That's what that's about. You had some other questions, I think.
About lights.
Lighting.
The lighting. At this time, there's no lighting proposed and no lighting included in the ordinance. Because our lighting ordinance is so specific, if they wanted to have nighttime lighting, they would have to comply with the existing ordinance, the dark sky ordinance that we have now, or they'd have to come back and amend this text amendment. For example, when the board adopted the 60-foot allowance for a lit Ferris wheel, we had a great deal of discussion about lighting, and we allowed lighting on the Ferris wheel at 60 feet. This is a use that is a daytime use. It really needs to be a daytime use because of the concentration and visual acuity that you need to perform any of these challenges or elements. So it's not perceived that this would be tall structures that are lit up at night. So I'd like to maybe get some feedback from the board about your thinking on the height issue, because perhaps we can craft an alternative to give you an additional sort of change in the text amendment for your motion if that's desired. What are your feelings about the height?
I'll jump in there. I'm more at 60 feet, I feel like, because that's the height limit that we have put on hotels. Communications towers, again, you usually would look at one serving a large area, and I don't think the 60 feet will hinder the park, really. So for consistency's sake, I would rather see it a little bit lower.
Elizabeth, I agree with the mayor on the pole height at 60. I think that's, you know, the hotel height, that's pretty high. And this is a great concept because it's green and open. The other concern that I still continue to be a little bit, and I recognize that Mr. Murphy on the planning board mentioned that when it comes to the planning board for this particular site plan, that they will really look at it carefully. But once you pass an ordinance, it's wide open. If you've left everything wide open and they want more restrictions, well, you've already made the law. The number of tower structures, I'm a little concerned with, even at 60 feet, that you could have 10 60-foot towers. And I don't know that that's the intention of this particular applicant, but I think somewhere in here I kind of like what we did with the amusement park, you know, with the Ferris wheel. I think somewhere we need to look at the number of towers and the height. You know, one at this, but no more than this at so many. Particularly for if someone were to use just a 1-acre site.
Were there other comments from the board regarding height?
Well, since I asked the question, I'm okay with the 70 feet, knowing that it's not going to affect town-wide. You know, I do think height is an important element for this type of park. So I'm not opposed to the 70 feet, you know, with the answers to the question. So.
It's been massaged by you all, by the planning board. It's now before us. I don't have an issue with the 70 feet either, but I can live with 60 feet if that's what you all want to do. That's my comment.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Teague on any of these issues? All right, thank you. Anything else from the public? Any other participation or comments? This is probably the last chance. Yes, Mr. Murphy.
Just a brief comment, which seemed to be hung up on 60 or 70 feet, you know, and it's my understanding from meeting with the applicant at the planning board is that there's only going to be one or possibly two at 70 feet. So we're not talking about 40 or 50 poles at 70 feet, and that pole would not have one of the little platforms at the top of the pole. It would probably be 8 or 10 feet down from the top of the pole. So we're talking about basically a telephone pole sticking up, you know, so I would encourage you not to necessarily get hung up on 60 versus 70 as long as it's not having any effect on anything else within our ordinances, you know. And there again, this is a conditional use permit, so we're not opening the door to anybody coming in with just about anything. It's always going to be a conditional use, and the planning board as well as the commissioners are going to make a final decision on whether we want that particular condition in there. Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir.
Since there is some concern on the height, I'd be willing to amend the ordinance to say 60 feet. I think that that would be plenty high. These are transparent. Most of them aren't towers. They're just single poles. So if you wanted to put a limit on how many actual towers, I know there was a picture of a tower. Of course, doesn't need, 4 towers would be more than enough. So if that helps things.
All right. Thank you. All right, does the board wish to receive any further information on this before beginning its deliberations? Last chance for comment? All right, at this time, we'll conclude the public hearing on this matter, and the board may begin its consideration of this proposed text amendment.
It's the pleasure of the board, ma'am.
You want me to start with a motion to start the ball rolling?
If you'd like to, yes, ma'am.
I make a motion that we pass this conditional use permit with staff's recommendations.
So it's
No,
a proposed text amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Lawyer. With the following change in the height, where it says, under no circumstances shall any portion of the aerial park exceed 70 feet in height, I would like to move that to 60. And the only other, I have one suggestion for an addition, is that there be no more than 4 towers permitted. That is my motion.
Is there a
Oh, no, it's not, I'm not finished, sorry.
Okay.
I know Elizabeth mentioned earlier that we could exclude the parking from this ordinance, but I would like to include the suggested parking by the parking committee, and that reads as 1 parking space per 3 elements within the course, plus a minimum of 4 parking spaces for employees, and make that a part of this ordinance, text.
Amendment.
Amendment.
That's good.
Yes. Carolyn, did I make myself clear on that? Okay, thank you.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Go ahead.
No, ma'am.
I would prefer not to deal with the number of towers at this point in time. I'd rather see rather that go through the planning board process and see, the design, the whole thing. I'd rather that portion go through the process. But otherwise, I think this would be a wonderful amenity and activity for our community, not only for our visitors, but also our citizens. And I think it's an activity for all ages that are physically able to do it. I don't see it as just for youth. I think it is a great team-building activity. It's environmentally friendly. It will certainly give a different perspective when you're participating of our whole community. I think the view would be rather spectacular, so I think it would be a tremendous asset.
Mayor Pro Tem? Comments?
If somebody's willing to make an amendment to it, I'm open to whatever you all think. I agree with Anna, 60 feet. If we make everything the same, 60 feet still height. But whatever you all want to do, I think that this is a beneficial business to the town.
And I agree on that it's a very low-impact piece of development. It does provide outdoor activities for our citizens, our visitors, et cetera. There is a trade-off. On wetlands, you wouldn't have anything over the wetlands if this was not there, so there is some trade-off there. And I agree with the 60-foot height limit. I would rather see us address the number of towers, perhaps in the site plan, though. Is that an amendment, a friendly amendment that you would?
You go ahead and be friendly.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we amend Commissioner Sadler's motion to exclude the limit of number of towers, include the 60 feet height limit and include the parking, but exclude the number of towers restriction at this point in the process.
Second.
Okay, I've got to recall my Robert's Rules of Order now, y'all. We have an amendment to the motion, and so we vote on the amendment first.
That's correct.
Thank you. I think I would have learned this after 4 years.
You're almost there.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Is there further discussion on the amendment to the motion? All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. The amendment to the motion passes unanimously.
Okay.
So, John, what do I do now?
Now you need to, well, now, if there's no further discussion, it would be appropriate to take a vote on the motion as amended.
Okay. The motion has been amended to exclude the restriction on the number of towers. It does include the 60-foot height limit and the parking standard. And all those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. The motion passes unanimously. And we look forward to having your business in town, sir. Sounds like a great idea and something that all those folks that aren't really scared of heights will enjoy.
It's environmental.
Low impact,
Yes.
except for the traffic, perhaps.
We do have a time-specific, well, I'm sorry, it was time-specific for 10 o'clock. Thank you for being patient with us in our discussion. I'm going to ask Commissioner Sadler to, and Ms. Scott, if you'll come to the podium. And I'm going to just say something very briefly while they are moving up there. Ronnie Scott was excuse me. Ronnie Scott was a great public servant of our town, and he was one of the originators of our beach permit system. And I often wonder what would happen if the National Park Service had followed Mr. Scott's lead and actually created some system to regulate years ago. He loved his community, and he loved the Nags Head surf fishing tournament. And it's an honor to have Mrs. Scott here. And I asked Commissioner Sadler to do this because I think she's probably a far better fisherwoman than I am a fisherman.
Thank you, Bob.
Yes, ma'am.
He did ask me to send this to you, Margaret Scott, my friend Poochie, and I'm honored to do it. I met you and Ronnie 40-plus years ago when we were all teenagers, and Ronnie was on a fishing team with my husband. It's called Surfside 6. She and I formed the Nags Head Fishtails in 1970. We fished together for 10 years. And like the mayor said, Ronnie Scott was very instrumental when he was on the Board of Commissioners in instituting the beach driving. So if it had not been for Ronnie, we may not still be driving on that beach. So we all know what he did for this town the 16 years that he was either commissioner or mayor pro tem. And we're so proud of him. And today, it's very fitting that he was #1 with the beach driving permit. And we're going to retire this. There have only been 2, this being the second one, that have ever been retired. Doris Scard was #2, and you know she was retired. So it's so special. You'd be so fun. I know you would.
Thank y'all, the friends and family, for coming out, and we really appreciate having you here. Congratulations, ma'am. We're going to take a brief recess. We're going to call our meeting back to order. Our next item is old business, public comments on the stormwater management ordinance, and Ms. Teague is going to share some public comments that we've gotten.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to recap, the ordinance was presented to the board on September 4th. The draft ordinance presentation and the summary notes that reflect all the meetings that went into that draft ordinance are available on the website. We put them up there right after that meeting in order to garner additional public comments. Also, the Board of Commissioners took further comment during your mid-month on September 18th, and then held a workshop the following day on September 19th to discuss the stormwater ordinance. So hopefully, people who are interested have every opportunity to understand what we're proposing and to comment on it. I'd also like to encourage people to contact me if they have any questions or want to have more in-depth discussions about the ordinance. And I've had the privilege of having a few of those in-depth discussions with some individuals that I've very much appreciated. Staff has also, moving forward, been directed to go ahead and provide the draft of the local BMP manual that is referenced in the ordinance. This is work that we're doing with the Coastal Federation to develop this ordinance. And in the meantime, I would like to point people to the North Carolina Best Management Practices Manual, which is available on the North Carolina Division of Water Resources website and has been, really, they started, made that information available in 2005, created a full edition in 2007, and that's been the working guide for North Carolina stormwater ordinances throughout the state, and is a technical manual that provides reference and resources for people working in stormwater management. The local manual that we're talking about is similar to the state manual, but it's essentially a document for a focus on effective local management practices, and will emphasize the low impact development or LID approach. These are also recognized in the state BMP manual, but we wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to identify things that we know that work well here on the Outer Banks. LID is an approach to management drainage which mimics the natural hydrology of any given site. The idea is to use landscaping, porous surfaces, and techniques to slow down stormwater runoff in a way that it can infiltrate naturally into the ground. It also provides technologies and system specifications for capture, retention, and reuse of stormwater, such as what you'll see in cisterns, underground tanks, maybe rain barrels. And the idea with LID is that it's low cost, it uses the natural land, and it also is something that anyone can do. So what we're hoping is this manual will provide a user-friendly resource for people interested in improving stormwater on their site and also in working with our local ordinance. So I've been asked to summarize some of the key comments we've received since the ordinance was presented, and both through the town's website and with the individual discussion to staff, as I mentioned before, I'll sort of go through some of the key ones. I would note that we've only had 3 comments submitted through the town website. 2 of those related to site-specific issues that aren't exactly reflective of what's stated in the ordinance draft. But we are trying to follow up with those individuals. And I will say they do express frustration with areas of localized flooding, which is one of the goals in the intent and purpose statement of the ordinance that we're trying to improve in terms of future development going forward. A third comment actually supported the ordinance in that it suggested that drainage systems must be kept clear and maintained, and that the town should maintain a map to locate and protect drainage ditches and have an opportunity or a way to prevent individual lot owners from interfering with drainage within the right-of-way. This writer also suggested that all subdivisions should be connected to an outfall and that the town create tax zones to ensure that properties being served by the improved stormwater system should pay for all those improvements. As you're all aware, we have some limitations on how our outfalls can be used. The ocean outfalls are specifically DOT maintained and controlled outfalls, and there's a lot of permitting involved. We have also asked the State Board of Engineers for their input into the ordinance regarding the point of engineering versus non-engineering plans and how that might work within a best management practices manual. both at the state level and local level. Our town engineer, Mr. Dave Ryan, actually contacted the State Board of Engineers and the Board Council, and received initial comments that the tabular approach being proposed for stormwater BMPs and volume calculations would not require quote-unquote engineering. They've requested some further consideration and clarification on siting and judgment of certain types of management practices being located on certain site applications, and we're hoping to get further input from them moving forward. It's important to understand that the goal in this was to allow builders of individual lots to be able to implement LID approaches and other stormwater management techniques using the state or local BMP manual without having to incur additional development costs. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for the individual property owner or lot developer to come up with a toolbox, if you would, of things they can do to capture, retain, and allow stormwater to infiltrate, rather than just brushing it off onto an adjacent property or dumping it onto the state or town right-of-way. Some other specific changes that staff would suggest based on the comments that we've received, some of which you've heard, would be rewording of 54.5B in the ordinance draft. And this is the point of clarifying that fill can't be used to direct stormwater onto an adjacent property. Initially, we had just said impact an adjacent property, and people felt like that was too vague, and we'd agree. Another suggestion, which we'd agree is a good idea, is to put back into the ordinance draft an allowance for bulkheads being used around septic systems at a 3-to-1 slope. This is section 34-2D of your current ordinance, and the proposed ordinance really only allowed bulkheads as they related to the residential fill slope adjacent to a property boundary. So we had tried to respect the town's desire to limit bulkheads on residential lots, and had taken out where a bulkhead might be used to retain fill required for a septic system. Particularly some of the more advanced septic systems or alternative septic systems require additional fill, and it actually makes sense to put that bulkhead allowance back in. We also heard a suggestion, and we would agree, that the operations and maintenance plan should be submitted with the application, and that the operations and maintenance agreement as a separate and distinct form should be executed and submitted as part of the certificate of compliance. So you'd have a plan that everyone sort of understood up front in the permit application process, but the certificate of compliance would not be issued until an agreement to maintain your BMP on site as required is signed. Finally, there was a good bit of discussion on these about concrete under the houses, and we've received an email from Commissioner Cahoon. I'm not sure that we're ever going to reach full consensus on this, but what staff's suggestion would be is to allow up to 1 feet of concrete beneath the house pad, but limited to underneath the roof line. This would be allowed in addition to the fill limits, but still keep it below BFE. And the goal here is to encourage development on pilings or short piles so as to allow floodwaters, when they occur, to be able to flow through the bottom of a house in a floodplain hazard zone. However, we agree that to some extent, concrete can be a useful part of the substructure of a house. People park on them, people use concrete to reinforce pilings and other structures for the under part of the house, and so it does make sense to us to try and not interpret that concrete as part of the fill, to keep it as a structural element under the house. Another thing I'll mention that's similar to that and came out of the same discussion, this was with our former engineer, Ralph Calfee, was that the town be more specific in its application of FEMA Technical Bulletin Number 5 regarding the use of fill in V zones. The floodplain administrator, right now, we have a specified limit on the amount of fill in terms of square footage of area that can be used in an EV zone. What the technical bulletin says, and what we maybe need to be clear on, is that the floodplain administrator has some discretion to allow up to 2 feet of fill, or maybe we limit it to 1 feet of fill in this purpose, in this case, for the purpose of landscaping, and landscaping only. In other words, we don't want these rules to be confused with or interfere with someone building a flower bed, someone doing some plantings or landscaping around their house. So we would like to make sure that within Technical Bulletin 5, as it's structured by FEMA, that we continue with some discretion of the local floodplain administrator to make some on-site judgment calls. And that's really what Technical Bulletin Number 5 was set up to do. We had tried to restrict that in the V zone, and not to take away from that restriction, but to actually specify in the ordinance that the floodplain administrator could do a little bit. So I'm going to conclude with just a clarification regarding a misperception. This was verbalized in the last public meeting, and I really want the board to understand this. Town staff and no one on the committee is saying or contending that adoption of this ordinance is going to solve all the local flooding issues that we're seeing in town. No one is under that illusion. So what we are saying, however, that adoption of this ordinance is going to solve local flooding issues or mitigate local flooding issues as new development occurs moving forward. It's a way to prevent our situation from becoming any worse because of the existing practices that we've witnessed for the last 20 years. As an agency, the town must recognize that localized flooding has always been a problem, and regulations in and of themselves won't fix all those problems. However, the proposed updates of the existing stormwater ordinance is one mitigative measure to minimize impact of future development so as not to make our situation any worse as development continues, and in the case of redevelopment, may even provide us some opportunities to address certain situations that we're seeing now and improve those as part of the redevelopment plan. The town, at the same time, in consideration of this ordinance, must continue to pursue, and already is pursuing, multiple approaches to addressing existing stormwater issues. These include the groundwater drawdown projects and ideas, and we're working on a Vista Colony project that I think has been fairly successful. Replacement of undersized culverts and redesign of drainage areas within rights-of-way, such as that in Moongate. Ditch and swale reclamation and ongoing maintenance. I think our Public Works has really done a terrific job over the last summer to get to maintenance issues on certain drainage ditches in neighborhoods. And also, our town manager and Public Works town engineer have had extensive conversations with DOT on some of the DOT rights-of-way drainage issues. Identification and purchase of lots for the purpose of strategic stormwater capture and management. This is something that's come up in our discussions and could be a project that we bring to you moving forward. This would essentially be the purchase of lots to claim them as open space for future stormwater management in certain neighborhoods. Holding the line on existing density. This is important because open space helps us to manage stormwater. Our lot coverage rules, our density rules have all been structured through a history of a lot of forward-thinking people looking at the situation in Nags Head, and it's important that we stick with those rules. And then finally, supporting the town's septic health program and positioning ourselves to update the 2005 decentralized wastewater management plan in the future. That is another good thing we can do for stormwater. Underlying this discussion, we are particularly concerned about where stormwater, groundwater, and septic usage are commingling. We're getting what's called a mounding effect, where you're just getting a lot of water and the water has no place to go. So we need to look at that plan moving forward. So just to restate, no one thinks that this stormwater ordinance is going to solve flooding and all the water quality issues that we have in Nags Head, but we do think it's a very important mitigative measure, and it's one of many that we want to work with you on. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ms. Teague? Oh, come on, y'all.
No.
I've got a question, because I've had some of that similar conversation with Mr. Calfee.
Okay.
And it has brought me to more of a concern that what we are doing may have unintended consequences. And most of our localized flooding seems to be caused by groundwater. And when we have a very wet year, that groundwater, the water table rises. Retaining stormwater on site seems like it would contribute to raising that water table. And that seems like where most of our problems come from. I think we've looked at fill as the enemy to a certain extent, and I think actually fill is probably our friend. There's a balance between that base flood elevation and having some freeboard versus not having as much fill. And I understand the concept behind it, trying not to dump stormwater on the neighbors. But I think we're at that point where most of those, we're not really going to affect that groundwater issue with this, and we have potential to actually increase the level of the groundwater in some of those areas. We have existing rules in place, I feel like, on the swales and culverts and those type of things, but it hasn't necessarily been the top of the list on enforcing those things. And I think if we do go back and enforce keeping the swales open, keeping the culverts at an elevation so that the water flows, I don't necessarily agree that we have a water quality problem in Nags Head. I feel like ours is more of an occasional, every couple of years, water quantity problem. And we are very fortunate to have that outfall system that can resolve some of those water quantity issues on an occasional basis and really not affect our environment. So was there a question in there anywhere? That was probably more comments, sorry.
Well, with those comments, is there a proposal to take part of this out, or are you kind of addressing the residential, the I guess remodeling of lots, the tear down of homes, and this will affect the building on that lot now? Is that what you're thinking about changing or removing? Because I think somewhere in the many documents I've read, you put the hammer right on the head of the nail. We're a barrier island with a very high water level, high water table level. And like you said, with the rain, it's here, but it's also quickly dissipated normally. I see this, Bob, as correcting a lot of problems for future. I don't see it, and you made it plain, I don't see it correcting the existing problems that we have when we have too much rain. But as to not do something for the future, I think we're going to continue to be reactive rather than trying to do something about the problem before it exists. Does my comment go along with yours?
It does, and I think my concern is more about unintended consequences of if you retain stormwater on site and you're trying to infiltrate it, all that does is raise the water table in that area. Or not all that does, but that is one of the side effects, is raising the water table in that area, which then goes back to the height of the water table makes a big difference in where we flood and how often we flood.
To the point about the retention and how it might impact the water table, Mr. Ryan might have some thoughts that might help.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. When we initially looked at this, we looked at both commercial and residential neighborhoods and where our problems were. I think it was determined early on that our commercial structures and the stormwater management measures that were in place were suitable, and that's not where our problem areas were. Our problem areas were located within these residential neighborhoods. The way that the ordinance is currently structured puts most of the onus on the town for treating stormwater management within these residential neighborhoods, because there is no requirement for on-site stormwater management. So when development occurs for a single-family residence, they can go ahead and sheet flow their rainfall runoff into the right-of-way. Then it's a town's problem. Now within the town, especially within the west side neighborhoods, there is, from what I've seen, is undersized drainage systems, or there may not even be any presence of drainage systems in order to adequately address runoff from residential sites. So what we're trying to do is put some of the burden on the homeowner in order to go ahead and treat their own stormwater management and treat it at the source. As far as the addition of elevated water table, anytime that you develop, you're compacting soils, adding impervious coverage, that's going to add to an elevated water table. That's just a consequence of development. I think with the addition of fill, you're then creating separation to that water table. But with the addition of on-site stormwater management measures, you're also giving the water somewhere to go with that development, and in order to go ahead and adequately address that runoff. Rather than go into somebody's ground floor, it's now going into a swale or going into an infiltration basin.
But from that infiltration basin, isn't it going to infiltrate into the groundwater?
It does. It eventually does.
And won't that raise the water table in that general area?
Again, whether you have that infiltration basin there or not, that water table is going to be raised. It's just where that water is going to go. If you have a lot that you put fill in, you have a sloped driveway. That sloped driveway then runs off into the roadway. Then that roadway runoff can then be transported downstream and create a problem for somebody else. We're now trying to address that problem by going ahead and having measures on site. So that individual is responsible for that portion of development.
And I hear what you're saying. I'm wondering that if you retain that water on site, doesn't that add to the groundwater problem if you convey, and I will tell you, I'm more concerned about water quantity than water quality here. I think our predecessors have done an excellent job on the pieces that we've put in place, the use of swales, the use of a lot of low-impact development things that we didn't call low-impact development because we did them 20 years ago, and it was just we were trying to do a good job of development. But I'm concerned about those unintended consequences. I would rather see us convey that water on out.
But the problem is dealing with other regulatory agencies and permitting us to go ahead and convey that to our ocean outfalls, and that's kind of where we're restricted. And that's why we're looking at other alternative and mitigative measures and treating this on site because of those restrictions.
Other questions or comments? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize.
Mr. Mayor, I had an additional thought on what Dave just mentioned, and I did get to talk about this with Mr. Calfee, and that is the idea of concentration. As permanently structured right now, the individual lot owner can dump their water onto the town right-of-way. They also can dump their water onto their adjacent neighbors if no one tells them not to. And we don't have a regulatory, and we treat that as a civil issue. So one of the goals of this ordinance was to take that LID approach where you diffuse water collection. Instead of everything going into the right-of-way, we're asking individual lots to retain and trap on that lot a portion of their stormwater runoff. And what that does is, rather than all of it running to the right-of-way where you have those localized flooding issues and you have conveyance or swales that are overwhelmed, it diffuses it, and so you'll have a little bit up on the lot in addition to what's being sent to the right-of-way. So it spreads it out, and this creates more opportunities for infiltration. So when you look at the groundwater table, particularly in the western neighborhoods and in the north part of town, where it's very high, you'll see that it's variable. There's a map that we showed where we, I guess in 2004, there was an analysis done of groundwater height to the top of the ground, I mean groundwater level relative to the ground elevation. And the goal here is to ask an individual lot owner to collect a certain amount on their site and infiltrate it there, as opposed to concentrating it into the right-of-way. So it's this idea of diffusion of where that water is collected, to give it greater storage potential by spreading it out, and to give it more time to infiltrate. And hopefully, with that addition of time, more of that groundwater can find a way to settle itself during storm events, if that makes any sense. But again, I think what we're going to look at with the groundwater table is probably a variety of solutions. The ordinance being one mitigative measure, but probably a continuation of drawdown types of projects and ditch maintenance as being what's going to help us make the situations we're seeing now already in place better. Just to conclude, we are going to be bringing forward to you the BMP manual at your mid-month, and then we're going to have a revised ordinance for your consideration in November that will include some of the comments that we've mentioned so far today. The ordinance is still on the website, and I'd encourage people to go and send us your comments, because there's still time to incorporate some of those ideas into the mix.
Would you please share those comments with us, like via email, perhaps as you receive them? Or?
Sure. We've got what we've received so far, both from the public meetings and from the website, and Carolyn can forward those on to you.
Okay, that would be helpful. And one more question. I too have some concerns about the unintended consequences, and we are looking at development and redevelopment, but you know, we still have great concerns with what's there now. And in many communities, between the highways or west side of the bypass, there was a swale system, which has ultimately been filled by most residents. Would reestablishing that within those communities to provide infiltration, would that be?
That would be very helpful and is highly recommended. Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that certainly is part of the problem, is that people come in and there's a ditch maybe in front of their yard, and they bring in fill and smooth over the ditch in an attempt to sort of get themselves more yard space, or they plant plantings to create kind of a buffer between their house and the street. And the impact of that is that when the water has nowhere to go, then it ends up in the street, or it may even flood their neighbors across the road. And we have a couple of situations like that. Right now, what we've been trying to do is work with those types of property owners in those critical spots on an individual level. But I think moving forward, it would be wise to be a little bit more aggressive about reclaiming some of these rights of way. It just might not make some of those neighbors very happy.
Well, I think, you know, on an individual level, unless it's done within the entire neighborhood so that everyone is treated equally, I think it's going to be problematic. But
I think you're right. Yeah, that's a good observation.
Mayor Pro Tem? Thank you very much, Ms. Teague. Appreciate it, and appreciate y'all keeping us informed on the rest of the public comments that we get, and we will anxiously await the BMP plan.
Yes, sir.
We do have a time specific. We're not quite as late on this time specific as we were on the last one. So that's good. Meredith Guns, the Assistant Planning Director from the town of Kildoville Hills. We appreciate your coming and sharing with us your program on the Landmark Commission that Kildoville Hills has implemented, and appreciate your time and sharing information with us.
Thank you for having me.
And I see Mr. and Mrs. Fisher in the audience. We will make some time for public comment. Appreciate y'all sending your letter as well.
Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for inviting me. My name is Meredith Guns. I'm with the town of Kildoville Hills, and I serve as... Elizabeth is taller than me. Almost everybody is taller than me, so no great feat there. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our Historic Landmarks Commission. I serve as staff to that commission and have since the commission was created by the Board of Commissioners. It was created I'm going to give you a very brief overview. Don't want to give you too many details. I'll answer any specific questions that you have. And I can only tell you how the town of Kildoville Hills is utilizing the local historic landmark designation as allowed by the state. So I'm sure that other places do it differently. This is Kildoville Hills. So we established in 2004. In 2006 was the first designation. It took a year and a half to do the inventory, and that's the very complicated sheet of paper you see here. This was the inventory done by staff that tried to establish a basis for our landmarks, and it was broken into the commission broke it into different eras of the town of Kildoville Hills, from the Frank Stick era to the Avalon Beach era, in time frames. Being a local historic landmark in the town of Kildoville Hills, being a local historic landmark, you're designated based on your individual structure. It's very different than historic districts. It's based on the architecture specific to your structure and the character of that structure in the town of which it's located. It's not so it looks like everybody else's structure. That's more of a district type thing where you restrict the type of materials people can use and the colors and the location. You're designated based on why your structure is architecturally unique and holds character for your town. So they can be scattered all over the place. They don't have to be in a group. The town of Kildoville Hills, I've given you our brochure of the 25 that are currently designated. They're all over town. They go from the west side to between the highways to some ocean fronts, north end ocean front, south end ocean front. There is one group that's together because they got together and wanted to do it together. And they all had significance to our town. So, the other thing about local historic landmarks that's different from other things that you may have read or heard about with designation, it does not designate the interior of a structure. State and national registry does. Local historic landmarks doesn't designate. We use the interior as further support for a designation, but it doesn't restrict any owners or designees from renovating the interior of their house, upgrading and appliances and fixtures and things of that nature. What does it mean when someone gets designated? They have an additional step if they want to do improvements to their property outside of regular maintenance and repair. They would have to get a certificate of appropriateness from our Historic Landmarks Commission. The certificate of appropriateness, they have to show that whatever they're doing is in the same architectural theme as the existing structure. Meaning, if you've got a cedar shake house with a hip roof, we want an addition to be a cedar shake house with a hip roof that matches. We don't want it to be stucco with a metal roof or things like that. So the certificate of appropriateness, we've issued 3 on the houses that we've done so far. All 3 were for additions. And all of them are done, and when you go by the house, you really can't tell where the addition was. One of them, they had to raise it, the addition 2 feet for base flood. but they still worked it into the roof line, so you can't actually tell from the outside that it's raised. That's the extra step, and once the certificate of appropriateness has been issued, then they can go through the regular building permit process. So that's kind of the extra step. When you get designated, that's the extra step you have to take with the town to do additions or major renovations that will affect the exterior outside of the structure. Another thing that's different than a lot of other preservation groups is that local historic landmarks can be demolished. Doesn't sound like it's right, but it's a very localized ordinance, and therefore, if a person wants to demolish a local historic landmark, they have to apply for a certificate of appropriateness, and they can use that. The commission can say, we want 365 days before you demolish it to allow for fair market purchase, or to allow for the Preservation Association to purchase it for the purposes of preservation. After 365 days, the house can be demolished. We've had one. It was demolished last fall, or this spring, somewhere in there. We did delay them 365 days. We had 3 people try to buy it. The owner wouldn't sell it, and it was demolished. So that's very different from being a national registry or state registry. They cannot be demolished. There's not an option for demolition for any reason, really. So the big thing about this is the difference in the Killable Hills program and what the general statutes allow. The general statutes allow you to designate local historic landmarks without owner consent. You can go and pick it and designate it, and the board can approve it, and the owner may or may not know about it. Town of Killable Hills created a policy from the very beginning that they were only going to designate with owner consent. The owners help us recreate the history, the owners help us recreate the title, the owners help us give the character, which is part of the designation of the house. What happened here? You know, what makes this pivotal to the town of Killable Hills? Why should we try to preserve it? And again, going back to this very complicated sheet that's very colorful, we write letters to houses that the commission wants to designate, asking them if they're interested. This tells us if they were interested, when we send them letters, if they were interested, if they said no. If they said no twice, we don't send them letters again. We usually try to send multiple letters in 3-year spans so that we're not bothering people. Or if ownership changes. If we go and look at a house and it's changed owners, we'll send the new owner a letter and see if they're interested. And if they are, we designate. If they're not, the commission puts it to the side and says, well, we'll send a letter in a couple years and see if they're interested then. We've done 25 designations. Started off with a lot all at once. People were very interested. And as you move forward, you know, the more letters you send out, we've done 1 this year. One's better than none, according to our commission and our board, and it's a great house, and they're very excited to be designated. So we do it only voluntary designations, and that's the policy. Even though the statutes allows for difference, they don't do that. So let's see, what else do I have? And going back to that for just one moment, the intent when this was done was to promote goodwill and camaraderie from the history of our town, to recreate that history and try to preserve a little piece of each part of our history, whether it was the millionaire row houses or a house that sat all by itself in the 30s, or if it was an Avalon flat top. All of those create a history of the town of Killable Hills and how it ended up where we are today to some extent. And that was a purpose, and that's why they don't designate outside of voluntary designations. Let's see. And I said this already, that our designations range all over town. It's not one area that it did start because Diane St. Clair Baum's house was destroyed, was torn down, and 4 houses went up in its place. That's how the idea of what can we do to try to preserve our character. And the commission, we looked at the historic district. We didn't qualify. We didn't have enough in one spot. We didn't have any state. We have 1 national registry, and that's the Wright Brothers. It's federal, so it's not really ours. We just claim it. And so we looked at the local historic landmark, and it has been successful for us. There are benefits of being designated. There's a 50% tax deferral. I say deferral, not break, because if you do demolish the house, you have to pay 3 years of it back with interest. And that's what the owner that just demolished it, actually, he sold it. The other person demolished it, so they're responsible for the 3 years of back taxes, not the previous owner. But it does give you a 50% tax deferral, and that's off of both your county and city tax. So your tax bill's half. And that has been a positive thing for our designees. When I talk to people about historic landmarks and whether they want to be designated, they're always a little bit cautious because of the big national registry or state registry and the restrictions, or historic districts and the restrictions on what they can do to their own structure. And I kind of akin to local historic landmark is the lowest level of preservation that the state offers. It is T-ball compared to National League. It is very localized. It is based on your town, on that structure, not your whole, community or even the interior of your house. So it is the lowest level of preservation offered by statute. Then you go to state, then you go to national registry. And like I said, the town of Kidover Hills has one national registry. Actually, I think the front of Kidover Grill is actually National Registry, but it moved from Richmond. It was the Millie's Diner. But, so that's in a nutshell kind of where our ordinance and how we've utilized it to preserve what one other thing. The commission does the report and finds out all the history and does the title work and all of that and writes an ordinance. They hold a public hearing. Ultimately, the Board of Commissioners holds the final public hearing, and the Board of Commissioners does the final approval. So if there is something in there that the board is not comfortable with, or they've heard from the owner and the owner says, listen, I've been thinking about it, it doesn't have to be designated. It is ultimately the board's decision. It does get recorded at the Register of Deeds. That's how the tax break occurs, because it's a recorded local historic landmark. So I'll answer any questions that you may have about the program.
Questions from Ms. Guns?
Well, Meredith, thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. The only comment that I want to make is that obviously through our emails, other people knowing that this is going to be on our agenda are under the false pretense that this follows the National Register, or something that's very, very, has been approached in the past to our historic district only. And I want to make sure that everyone in the audience is very clear on two issues, and that is that of all the people, and by the way, how many do you have on the commission that have been designated, Meredith, now?
25.
25. And do you recall the number of letters that originally went out? I mean, there's over 100, I think you said.
We've sent out hundreds of letters.
Right. No one that has been designated was designated against their good wishes.
Correct.
Correct.
I've spent hundreds of hours on the telephones with owners too, and about 10% end up saying yes.
Okay. And why do these, and it's townwide, it's not just, well, we've kind of approached our Cottage Row in the past for historic preservation, but yours is townwide, is that correct? Everywhere in town? But
the local historic landmarks is a townwide ordinance. If you're going to get to a specific area, you really need to talk about historic districts, not landmarks. It's a very different approach to preservation.
Right. And that's what I also want to make clear today is when I brought this up, I am referring to historic structures in Nags Head, not specifically Cottage Row as we know them. The other reason that someone would want their dwelling on the on the commission would be their desire to preserve that piece of history in your town, plus the tax break?
Yes, ma'am. We've had some that have been under the same ownership since construction. We've had some that have changed ownership 6 or 7 times, and as it's changed, that history's been preserved, and I can actually title search it back to the original family and talk to them about its construction, to why they sold it to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and how it ended up with so-and-so. And some of them are in family trust, and they want to make sure that their grandkids don't tear it down to, I mean,
For money?
there's all kinds of reasons. And a lot of them, almost all of our structures have been lifted. They're not in original, you know, exact locations. A lot of them have been lifted, a lot of them have moved west. After the Ash Wednesday storm, I think that 3 of our designees have not been lifted since their construction in the 40s. Impressive. But they have the 22-foot dune. They can't see the ocean if they tried from their houses. But that wasn't their intent. Their intent was to have a house at the beach.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry.
I have several questions. Is there an age factor, like the age of the home? Is that a factor? And if so, what is it?
That's up to your commission and how you approach that. What we did here is, if you look at the spreadsheet, again, I don't mean to keep putting you back to this very complicated spreadsheet that's got all the colors on it, but if you turn to the last page, there's a little thing that says error, and it's going to tell you, we broke it into commercial buildings, millionaire row houses, Avalon flat tops, cottage courts, buildings built between 31 and 55, 56 and 65, 66 and 70. And what the commission has chosen to do is try to get samples from all of those errors, number one. And once they'd kind of accomplished that, they really stuck with the older homes. They were going for pre-1955 houses. That was their choice. Some of our homes, the Avalon homes weren't built till mid-50s and 60s, but they held some significance, and so they were moved to a different category. They didn't want to look at age just because of age. They wanted to look at the character of the town and what it brought to it. So they have stuck with the older houses, you know, but they've also pulled some from different eras, including the Avalon era, that aren't quite as old. We call them our young ones.
And I have another question, if it's okay.
Okay.
Well, I have a couple more. How do you make up for the loss of taxes?
What we've done is we give a report to the Board of Commissioners yearly as to the tax revenue that's been lost. It's actually, in the overall picture, it's very minimal. I mean, we have 25 houses that are designated. I think the number is under $20,000 in revenue that have been deferred. We just got 3 years back on one of them because it was demolished. So it's not posed a concern for our board to date. And if it does, of course, the board can direct the commission that they have to limit designations to 1 or 2 a year. It's in full control of your town because it is a town ordinance. It's not a state or national ordinance. So if you wanted to limit the number of landmarks that your commission was able to pursue a year, you could. It would be a policy decision. That we haven't run into it in Kill Devil Hills. It's just.
And you also do commercial, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We have one commercial designated right now, and that's the old Cypress House Inn or Cherokee Inn. It was built in the 20s
Okay. And
or
then
late 20s.
you're the person that works with the commission throughout this process.
I work with the commission, the owners, and the Register of Deeds.
So how much staff time does that take? How much of your time does that take?
It depends on how many you're doing. If you do 1 a year, it's probably, 3 or 4 days. 1 year we did 6. That was a significant amount of time. Because you have to go to the Register of Deeds, you have to do the entire title search. The owners may be chatty, I've found that. Some take about 15, 20 minutes on the phone to give you the lowdown, and some take an hour and a half because they haven't talked to someone on the phone for 3 or 4 days and want to chat, tell you about their grandkids, where they live now. So
How about initially in the process? Were
the
you-
doing the inventory was time consuming. Setting up the spreadsheet took some time. I wouldn't say that it took away from my regular duties. Greg helped me a lot. He's grown up here, and so we rode around and basically started picking houses, and then went back to the tax records to see when those houses were constructed and kind of where they were in the scheme of our town. So, I mean, we took our time too. The commission was very patient. We took 1.5 years to do the inventory, to create the errors with the commission, to take pictures. We did picture books of every single house that we put on the inventory for them with the date it was constructed. And from there is when they started wanting to send out letters. So it was if you want to have it happen immediately, it's going to take a lot of time. If you're willing to allow it to go through the process, then it's manageable.
Thank you.
Meredith, I want to read something pretty briefly. It's just a short paragraph. It's under the designation process. And I don't know if I'm
From
just
our
taking...
ordinance?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, maybe, well, I don't know. Is it?
Or is it the general statute?
General statute. It's a state. It's a state,
General statute, that's right.
yeah, general statute.
168.
Did you, was this thing adopted under the state general statute, correct?
The statute is put into the ordinance, but then the ordinance is modified to our purposes.
Okay.
It gives you quite a bit of latitude in the statute.
I'm a pretty open-minded individual. However, when in the designation process, it states, the designation process usually begins when the commission identifies a property or an area of potential landmark or district. The commission studies the site, writes a local designation report, which documents the site's significance. The commission normally contacts property owners during this stage to seek their cooperation and to explain the ramifications of local designation. Although seldom done, a landmark may be designated over the objection of its owner. However, the owner's consent is required for designation of privately owned landmarks interior.
Correct.
Likewise, the district may be designated over the objection of property owners. The state law does not provide for designation of the interiors of properties within the district.
Correct.
I don't know if I'm just taking this out of context, but it seems like negatives. The possibility, and I know you haven't done it, but the possibility is there. Can you throw this thing out where it says, even over the objection of the homeowner or property owner? Or
You could write that into your ordinance, yes, sir.
so the ordinance cannot supersede it, but it can be less than your own local ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
Can't be
Because
more
I-
restrictive. I mean, if you do not want designated properties that don't have owner consent, that is something that your town would control. And I spoke with our estate people, and I'm sure if you really want to know a lot more about this, they'll come talk to you.
I come originally from the city of Annapolis. Annapolis has a
Now, see, that's
historic,
very different.
historic district commission. I know, as being
And I
being
talk
as an
to people
official.
from New Jersey that are in the same position. They've lived in a historic district and they hate it
Well,
because
I
they
mean,
can't
yeah,
do anything.
exactly.
And it's very, 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 very different because you're designating your house. That's like saying, I love my house and I love the way it looks. And I might not like my neighbors, but I don't have to look like them under this type of program. You have to look like your house, and you have to continue to look like your house to receive the benefits of a designation. If in any way you modify the house so that it no longer has that architectural appearance, then you will be removed from the program and have to pay the back taxes.
Even though government has, over the years, done its best to step in the way of people's property or property rights, I don't want that to happen for anybody. And,
I'm
and I
confident
don't-
the Kittle Hills didn't
Yeah,
either.
okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah.
Other questions, comments from the board? Sir?
Every designation, every landmark has its own ordinance and its own public hearing.
Has its own ordinance and its own public hearing, and its ordinance is based on its character and its architecture. It's separate documents for each and every structure.
So then.
Two separate documents.
That's the time where the property owner and the commission could work out appropriate changes or things that couldn't be changed in order to keep that, what made it a landmark to begin with.
We don't do that in the designation process, but when we come to the certificate of appropriateness,
Okay.
like I said, we've done 3, and all 3, that they've come in and they wanted to be designated. They don't want to change their house. They want, one had the old 40s kitchen that was about as big as this podium, I swear. And they wanted to enlarge it slightly. And so they did a 200 square foot addition. And they had to raise it 2 feet, like I said, but they ran their cedar shakes 2 foot lower, so it looked like it was at the same level, even though you had to take 2 steps up to get into the kitchen. If you drove by it, you wouldn't know. But the people that want to be designated don't want to alter their house to change the appearance. They're proud of it. And that's why we designate only voluntarily.
Why do you think you don't have more? I mean, 25 is great.
Because
don't get
people
me
are
wrong.
scared. I mean, the same thing that y'all are saying. People are nervous as to what it might do to their value. We've actually found that it actually increases a little bit the property value because there is a preservation aspect to it. We have a lot of people that are interested, but to call them next year, and so we just call them next year.
Is there a process for undesignating?
Now, there's 2 different processes, and one of them's a little bit gray, and I'm not very versed at talking about it, is an owner requesting removal. I'm not sure how that happens. I've come to understand that I think it can, but I don't know how.
Just pay the taxes.
No, we have two designated structures that did not choose to take the deferral.
Okay. But you choose to undesignate, and you got to pay the taxes.
Because to take the deferral, we send them the paperwork. They have to fill out the paperwork and turn it into the tax department. We don't send anything to the tax department. We inform the tax department that there's a designation. We have 2 that haven't taken the deferral. They think it's a Big Brother conspiracy, so they're not going to take it. It's fine with us. They're still designated. It's just the benefit of being designated is really what the deferral is. But if you alter your structure or you don't maintain it to the point that it's lost its integrity, then the commission would adopt another ordinance that would remove its designation. And again, you can apply for a certificate of appropriateness, demolish it, and that, of course, removes its designation also.
I think you will find as Dare County taxes increase and KDH taxes may increase to pay for beach nourishment, you will find more people more interested in that tax deferral process.
I have a few more questions. Meredith, and I don't want to be repetitious, but I'm going to be. Kill Devil Hills has in the ordinance that they do not forcibly put someone on this designation unless that person is ready, willing, and able. Is that correct?
It's not in our written ordinance. It's
Okay.
a policy directed by the board.
It's in the policy?
Yes,
Okay. Have you had anyone that wanted to be removed?
We've had one that wanted to be demolished, and it's gone.
And that was and they had to pay back the 3 years of the tax deferral?
Well, they're supposed to.
Oh, they're supposed to, okay. Well, the new owner will,
Right.
will have a little tax lien on that
That's
property.
correct.
Okay. And have you had anyone that, well, I'm sure you have, but I'm going to ask anyway. You've turned down quite a few people.
We've had 3 that we went through the process with and did not designate, based on the state's comments.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do you want me to explain that at all? A little bit?
Go ahead.
When you do a report, you send it to the state, and they send you comments that are unbinding comments. You can designate whether they agree with the designation or don't agree with it. They just kind of send you their opinion. They're the experts. And they've sent us opinions that were not in favor, that the house didn't hold the character or integrity that we were trying to promote or that we had written even. And the commission at that time ended the designation process and didn't designate them. And we've done 3. We've gone through the whole title search and the report and talking to the owners, and then we call the owners and say, you know, it didn't have a favorable response from our state historic preservation office, and, you know.
And you've done this since 2004, if I recall?
We started, the commission was formed in '04. We did our first designation in 2006.
In 2006, and so you have accumulated 25, is that correct? If you had to go back and do it again, would you, once you were set up, which isn't overnight, would you limit the number of people that you would consider putting on each year if you had to go back?
I think that would be a better question for our governing board than me.
Okay. Okay.
In case they're watching.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I did want to give the Fishers an opportunity to comment on this. Y'all, thank you for writing the letter, and y'all have had an interest, obviously, in this and past suggestions. Would y'all care to make comments at this time, or? Yes, sir.
Fisher at 4023 South Virginia Dare Trail. And I was just asking Ms. Guns that Ken Guns is her husband. And actually, more than a designation, we need Ken Guns over at our property, but for preservation purposes. But I'd like to make one little comment on the ordinance. I believe it would be helpful if you place the ordinance on your town's website so folks can read through it and grasp the regulations and the controls that appear to mirror the state statutes. And I guess Mr. Leidy can better inform with respect to how far you can go on a local ordinance without going out of the bounds of the state regulations. But there are guidelines that occur in that ordinance that are very specific. And the powers of the commissioners, it seems like on the volunteer portion that it is up to the commissioners. It would be interesting to know why that wasn't written into the ordinance. But merely looking at the ordinance and examining the ordinance may well make you feel a little bit nervous. But we certainly appreciate Ms. Gunn's comments this morning. It gives us a little bit more of the guidelines on it, and we thank you for holding the discussions. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. And the Fishers did write a letter, and I know you've got a copy. I tried to forward mine to the whole board, but I'm not sure that it went through.
It did.
I think
Good.
it did, yes,
Wonderful.
yes. And one of the, if I could, before we close on this, did I at any point want to pick on our historic district again, Cottage Road? No. But I had people outside of that district to ask me about what is this Landmark Commission? What is it all about? How does it work in Kill Level Hills? And you need to get information. And when I realized that there are quite a few other structures in Nags Head that are old. And I thought, you know, what would happen if that little building were gone? Another piece of Nags Head history. And one I'm thinking about right now is where I first registered to vote. That is an old building. In fact, the lifeguards are using it now. It's been town hall, fire department, and so when I started looking through town, I thought, you know, maybe this is something that we could offer Nags Head voluntarily to think about it. And I was thrilled when I talked to Tanya Young. She's your, I think, chairman of the commission, Meredith, and got a lot of information from her. Talked to the people again that had originally brought this up to me. And I thought, well, I need to really go to the planning department. So my whole excitement about this is, and Meredith did say it was policy, not in the ordinance, is that it's all voluntary. You don't have, government is not shoving something else down your throat. And why would you do it? Well, for preservation, for the historic acknowledgement, recognition, whatever. But it's also a nice tax break. And that's why I'm thinking, Susie made a comment about the deficit in your tax income. It probably would be a good idea to limit so many per year. But saying all of that, I really appreciate these people coming to me originally on this, and I really appreciate you coming because you have explained a whole lot. And the last thing I want to say is, again, this is not something that Nags Head would be forcing down someone's throat. It would be totally voluntary if I have anything to do with it. And hopefully, the board will consider in the future passing something the way we can offer this, because I think it's well needed as we go into our redevelopment period, which seems to be on the brink.
If I could offer one more thing, when the town decided to do this, we spent a lot of time talking to the state preservation offices. You have a regional office in Greenville. The gentleman's name is Scott Powers, and the state office. When we did our ordinance, we sent it to them multiple times for review and approval for its guidelines with state statute. If you wanted to create an ordinance that actually codified your policy on voluntary, and the state agreed that that was okay, then that's something you could codify. It would be good for, if you're really interested, to take the time to speak to the people at the State Historic Preservation Office about local historic landmarks. There's a lot across the state, and they have a lot of experience in a lot of different types of environment, and they'd be extremely helpful in creating an ordinance that worked with the town of Nags Head. If that's where you want to go, definitely get them on board before you even start writing. Okay. Good.
Meredith, thank you very much for all of your time
Thank
and
you. Y'all have a
sharing your
nice day.
experience and information. We
Have a good
appreciate
day.
it. Our next item is new business, committee reports. Mayor Pro Tem, anything to report?
I do. Roberta has the report from Channel 20. I was not able to attend.
The Government Education Access Channels meeting, or committee met, I guess, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and as Mayor Pro Tem said, he could not attend. I just wanted to give you a quick update. We went over the budget and disbursements. Nothing really has changed with that. GovEd is working with the College of the Albemarle on a videography training course in which the COA students would be able to use GovEd equipment to train, but should the GovEd members need to use that equipment, we would be available, we would have the ability to use equipment also. So just let you know, look forward to that. We will be able to apply for another, what they call Local Planning Development Initiative grant of $20,000 this year. Much like we paid for these nice equipment, the 3 cameras we have in here as well. It, of course, has the grant, whatever we use for that, has to increase programming on either the government or the education channel. First Flight High students have developed a great video for the education channel using equipment they purchased through the Local Planning and Development Initiative program. And, you know, I should have given you the website where you can watch that. So people are using these grants in great ways. We were actually working on high-definition versions of the channels 19 and 20. It's been kind of slow working with Charter, but they're moving forward. And we're hoping to get 719 and 720. I don't know if that'll work yet or not, but Michael Odell over at Government Channel is working on it. That's all.
And that website is on there, channel 20, what channel is it there? It's 21, isn't it?
Channel, which channel? Well, the government, the education channel
Ours is 20, what's the schools?
19.
19. The website's on channel 19, I've seen it.
Yes, and both channels are, well, actually, the Gov Ed channel is streamed live on Dare County website, and we have a link to that as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
And if anybody, I don't know if you, I'm sure that Susie does, but I don't know if everybody else does. You need to peruse both of those channels. They have some good stuff. They did some good things with programs and just, if you get the opportunity and you're thumbing through the channels, I'm not saying seek it out, I'm just saying, you know, when you have the opportunity, have some time, look at the education channel and the government access channel. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Walters?
Well, I see Cliff is going to give an update on the Walk to School Day, so I have nothing to report.
Mr. Sapp?
We had our tourism board meeting last month in Avon, actually, at Camp Hatteras, the facility there, which again was another facility that the tourism board had never been in. It's nice moving around the county, and I hope that they continue to do that next year, because if you're doing tourism for the whole county, you kind of like to be a little familiar with the whole county. And it was brief. Actually, I think the most disturbing thing that I have to report is that while the occupancy and the meals tax seem to be okay, they're not exciting figures, the retail sales tax is upsetting. We finally had 2 months that were in the positive. I think there were 2.25, but overall, to date, we are only up 0.72% from last year. And we kind of discussed, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that while the people are here, they're just not purchasing. I mean, they're just not spending that sales tax money, which again is a little disturbing. But saying that, we do have a steering committee meeting next week, and we're excited again to have VHB come back and go over some more projections for the Outer Banks event site, taking into consideration a lot of those remarks that were made at the public hearing held at the recently at the Comfort Inn. One of the things that we are trying very hard to do, and since the newspaper is here today, maybe he'll help, is to try to get away from that word amphitheater. Because when you say amphitheater in all 3 of those that we were given, it's kind of like Roanoke Island Festival Park, is what people are seeing. And we did have quite a few comments at the public hearing that, you know, you really shouldn't do something in competition with. So hopefully VHB has, it was never, from what I could gather, it was never going to be an event site of that huge accommodation ability. So we are going to try very hard to bring that into a more reasonable focus when we meet with them next Tuesday. So it'll be interesting to bring you back next month what the board has to say about the new stuff.
On your sales tax figures, was that through the end of July or through the end of August, just out of curiosity?
We met in September. That was the end of July. We you know, we don't, I don't know
There's a
what,
lag,
whatever, there's a, yeah.
But I think your conclusions are exactly correct. People are coming, but they're not spending as much money as they were.
Yeah.
Our next item under new business is consideration of the town community care clinic lease agreement renewal.
Yes, sir, thank you. This item amends the current lease that you have in place with Community Care Clinic for space at 425 Health Center Drive, which is the historically known as the Outer Banks Medical Center building. The Community Care Clinic picked up this space in the lease when CSI moved over to Skyco. That lease was set to expire at the end of this year. So they're requesting a new lease, and that's what's before you. Instead of going month to month, they're asking for a 3-year lease that would begin January 1st, 2014 and terminate on the 31st. And then another option, another 3-year renewal option. You've toured the facility, the Community Care Clinic, invited you in. They've done what I think we would all agree an outstanding job in basically reverting it back to its original use. It's a wonderful facility, and so they're kind of striking where that iron's hot to try and get a renewal here. It extends their rent from $500 a month to $525 a month, and then to $550 a month if the second renewal is opted for. The only other changes is that we've also written in a few house cleaning things. There was a portion, the shellfish sanitation will continue to utilize space in that facility, and you have a separate lease for that, so some of that language was cleaned up. And the rest, I think, is pretty straightforward.
How long is that shellfish lease extend to? I'm
That
sorry?
lease will continue on a month-to-month. It expires at the end of this year, but it goes for a month-to-month. But you have to give 60 days notice. Either party must give 60 days notice to vacate that lease, but it will continue on a month-to-month basis.
Questions for Cliff?
I do, about the lease, Cliff. The number 14, is that after the first 3 years? Or is that after, when does that come into play?
John, help me, but I believe that would be if no action's taken, it would automatically renew for 3, and then after that, it would automatically renew for month to month. But it would then go up to $575.
Correct.
Okay, after the first
initial
3
term,
years?
that's right.
Correct.
Okay. So that could be into infinity?
Right, but you still have the option to exercise the 30 days for written notice to terminate. So if you don't take any action, it will automatically renew, and then if you decide you want to terminate, it'll take 30 days.
Right.
Okay, well, what would happen if you decided after 4 or 5 years that you really needed to go up on the rent? You would just give them a notice of termination, but you can stay, and here's the new rent?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I would, if we were to do that, I would suggest we just enter into a lease amendment at that point to specify the new rent.
Yeah, I just didn't know if this went on to, your 2025 or whatever. Okay, that's it. I did ask Cliff a couple of things. Cliff, you might want to share with the board about who pays the maintenance of the building and who keeps up the maintenance, and who pays the insurance and what we have over there, just so they know. I'm comfortable with the lease now that you've answered that question, John. But there were other questions that I asked Cliff that I think the board would be interested in.
Yes, ma'am. The town we still have space in the building that we use as a place of last resort in the event of a disaster, namely a hurricane. We have a very small amount of value placed on the contents there. We also insure the structure itself. We don't have any liability or any contents coverage for any of community care clinics or any of Shellfish's, any of the contents that they have in the facility. So they maintain the inside of the facility. We clean up the outside, we maintain the grounds, but they have their own liability for the facility. And that, we have $3,875 a year that we're spending for the, for insurance valued at $828,000 for the building, and then $72 a year for the property, the contents, which is valued at $15,324. So we do maintain coverage.
And in addition to what community care pays in annual rent, we also have, excuse me, Shellfish, which is still at $17,500. Is that correct?
Per year, yes, ma'am. And they pay all, the tenants pay all utilities.
Okay. Oh, that was it. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Further questions? Any comments, questions for Cliff? I'm going to move.
Does this require approval?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes. I'm going to move for approval of the
Second.
lease.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank y'all. I think the community care clinic is a great addition to our town, and I was impressed with what they had done with the facility when we toured through.
And if I could, just a plug here for them, there's an open house or ribbon cutting on October the 10th, next Thursday at noon. So if anyone hasn't been in lately, it'd be a great opportunity to go and visit the facility and check out the community care clinic.
Thank you, sir. Good call. Y'all, it is 5 after 12. We don't have a huge amount left on our agenda, but okay with y'all to push on through? Anybody having hunger pangs yet?
You don't have a whole lot left.
No, sir, we don't. Okay, well, we're going to keep going then and, after that. Mr. Leidy, anything from the town attorney today?
I would like to request a brief closed session with the commissioners, 5 to 10 minutes, in order to...
Visit lunch.
Sir, it will be brief. I just want to discuss briefly with the town the new litigation filed by the Bank of Hampton Roads against the town, which we received a copy of yesterday. But the discussion will be brief about that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Manager?
Take an opportunity to ask Elizabeth Teague to come up and talk about a day that we're becoming more and more proud of, and that's the Walk to School Day next week.
Yes, next Wednesday is Walk to School Day. Walk to School Day is organized by the Partnership for a Walkable America, and we're going to be one of thousands of communities and in the United States and in over 40 countries participating in Walk to School Day. And really, Walk to School Day, the purpose of it is to get communities and children thinking about ways to change how we think about transportation and public safety in and around schools. Although Walk to School Day is focused just on walking, we would like to say that anyone is welcome to ride their bicycle as well. And this spring, there will be a Bike to School Day event. There are several reasons to support walking and bicycling in your community. And here in Nags Head, we're doing it as part of a Safe Routes to School program. First of all, walking and bicycling is fun and it empowers children. Studies have shown that there's a sense of joy and independence and certainly exercise when children are allowed to walk to and from school. If you talk to people a generation ago, many people walk to school as their primary mode of transportation to and from school. If you talk to a child now, hardly anyone does. So it's a way to try and create that community and create that childhood independence. Certainly, it's also about healthier habits. The trip to school is a chance for children and adults to get the physical activity they need. According to the State of County Health Report for Dare County in 2011, North Carolina ranked 5th out of 50 states in regards to childhood obesity. Childhood obesity has also been and continues to be a significant health concern in Dare County, with 21% of 5 to 11-year-olds in our county considered to be overweight compared to the statewide rate of 17%, both of which are a concern. Also, walking, replacing a car trip to school with walking or bicycling can reduce congestion and reduce air pollution through a reduction in emissions. Further, encouraging walking and bicycling to school helps build support for infrastructure improvements in the broader community and to promote awareness of traffic safety. The town of Nags Head is participating with DOT and other municipalities in the county in the Outer Banks Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Coalition. This coalition is working to educate citizens and visitors as well as foreign workers on the rules of the road. And there are informational materials and bumper stickers available through the planning department and through that coalition, and we're happy to provide those to you. The idea is Walk to School Day is one other event in a sequence of events to promote education and awareness. And finally, I'll just mention that in addition to reducing traffic congestion and boosting a sense of community, walking to school can create community connections. The town's working on several projects now to improve our infrastructure and to develop ways to engage children and the larger community in planning. So this is one opportunity that we have to bring people together, to look particularly at the walking issues, walking opportunities that we have in town, to look at traffic safety in our school zone, and just to try something different. You'll see in that flyer that we have several options for meeting locations, and we'd encourage anyone who's interested in participating to be at one of these 4 sites at 7 a.m. if you're interested in helping a child walk to school. We've got US 158 at Villa Dunes Drive near the Ark Church. We have Vista Colony at the ATM machine in Central Square. The shops at 10 and a half near Food Lion has proven to be a popular gathering location. And then US 158 at Bonnet Street, the YMCA parking lot. People will be there, and we'll have additional crossing guard duties both at Bonnet Street and at the intersection of Bonnet and Wrightsville, where the entrance to school is. We'd like to remind everyone that the town has worked very hard to develop a multi-use path system along US 158, and we really want to encourage people to use that and to cross only at designated crosswalks. There's some very exciting planning initiatives coming up where we're hoping to expand that network of paths throughout town. We have a comprehensive pedestrian plan that we're going to begin working on. We're also looking at a boardwalk plan along the sound side in that recreational overlay district. And then we've asked the tourism board for additional consideration to allow us to help us continue to build that multi-use path along US 158 further to the south. Ultimately, we'd like to get it to Hollowell with a crosswalk there, and then to pick up down in the south and tie in Windmill Point with Whalebone Park and the Whalebone Junction area. So there's a lot of exciting connections we're trying to make. Walk to School Day is an opportunity for us to celebrate and remember how easy it is and fun it is to walk, get out and walk. So feel free to join us if you're interested. And if anyone has any questions or would like to particularly volunteer, you can contact me at the planning department. School starts at 7:55, so it's not a long event. We should all be done by 8 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It's funny to be one of that generation ago now, because I did have the opportunity to walk to elementary schools, and it is a great thing to cut through somebody's backyard to get to school.
Another item on my agenda, I heard from Jerry Jennings this week that they're not quite ready to come back to you with their recommendations for crosswalk improvement at the Little Bridge. I have yet to hear from the their response to the resolution for lowering the speed limit another further mile, the 35, before it hits 45, and adding the 2 crosswalks at Outer Banks Pier and Nags Head Pier. But before those resolutions were signed and acted on by you all, Jerry assured me that if that came from you all, then that would get done. Those were the easy ones. The more difficult issue for them is coming up with a recommendation or a plan to improve the crosswalk or including a crosswalk at the Little Bridge. I have forwarded him the comments from Mr. Cromwell from the planning board that Mr. White spoke of at public hearing today. That I think the issue comes down to their standard and their municipal or their manual and uniform traffic control devices is that in order to have a crosswalk, you're not going to put in a pedestrian activated crosswalk or a signal unless if the speed limit's over 40 miles an hour. So I think that's the first stumbling block that we have to get to, is lowering the speed limit on the causeway in order for them to feel comfortable about putting up either a pedestrian activated or a signalized crosswalk. And Commissioner Sadler had referenced one up in the Sanderlin area that I believe they're LED lights that actually outline the crosswalk signal just in advance of a car coming when someone's crossing. And I asked Mr. Jennings about that, and the Sanderlin Resort paid for it and installed that. And that's been there for quite some time, but I think DOT has made it, or has tried to make it pretty clear to us that they'll do the basics because that's what they can afford to do. But the opportunity, and I think the board at the workshop you had with DOT was that you were willing, because it was a big enough of an importance, that you were willing to put in some funding for whatever recommendation they may agree to. So he has assured me by October 16th we will have their recommendations and we'll be able to move forward. I know you wanted to wait on that resolution that we were going to send forward until you got those recommendations, so I'd unfortunately suggest you delay that another 2 weeks.
And I'm going to add on to that. I have left a message for Mayor Jamie Daniels over in Manio to see if we can get both towns saying, hey, we need to do this, because they've had issues with the Wanchese intersection. And looking at possibly going from slightly before the Wanchese intersection to the Whalebone intersection with a reduced speed limit. So I'm sure he will poll his board and see if there's support for that.
And also remind Jerry about what you just said about the working relationship with this board, reference financing. Possible financing, whatever we talk about.
Partial financing.
Cliff,
Because
do
I
you,
think it'd make it more palatable for them.
Sure.
do you, I think you got the cost of that one at the Sandy, just so that the board's not shocked. You know, when you get shocked and then you say it again and again, maybe it's not so shocking. But that light up there, and it's been a while since I've been up there. I don't know how long that light's been. It says something. I mean, you see it.
We've looked at the cost of a one that you see in or Southern Shores right as you get on to 12 heading to Duck, and that, Ralph, if I'm not mistaken, we had a price at one time for just the one flashing light. You recall?
The one I was looking at is the
Right,
one
the
that
LED.
got, yeah, the LED
They're
around
not,
it.
they're not
They're not
extravagantly.
Okay.
I mean, it's not, I would have no fear of putting that sticker in front of you.
participating in
Yes,
that
ma'am.
cost. Is it, Doug, is that what you were talking about? Yeah.
I think when I was looking at the little bridge and looking at the various scenarios, I had priced out exactly what you're talking about, which is the diamond-shaped sign with the LED lights on it as part of an advanced warning for signalization. And I believe that is around $2,000 to $2,500 for that actual signage itself. And then you also have the pedestrian activated light. I think that was somewhere in the range of about $5,000. Then the two, if you wanted to use the two in conjunction with each other, you'd have to have a relay. And I don't have labor costs, I just have the material costs for that.
But they're not extravagant at all.
Okay, thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to mention was the first effect on the town of Nags Head of the federal government shutting down is going to be on beach driving. Yesterday, beach driving began in the town, but those that wanted to drive on the National Park Service seashore woke up yesterday to chains across every ramp in the seashore. Well, you know, last year was the first year they implemented the cost for those permits, and I was concerned that people were going to inundate our beach because they weren't going to pay the permit. That wasn't the case. The Park Service made a ton of money off of that permit. But we've already seen an increase. They were lined up this morning before we opened to get them, which I'm not sure has ever happened. They were lined up this morning before we opened to get their permits so they could drive on our beach, and we're going to get the word out because, you know, there are non-business hours where folks can purchase these permits, and we'll get this information out. But I wanted to share now that the other locations where somebody can go and purchase a beach driving permit, they're at TW's, and you can get that from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Whalebone Tackle from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Fishing Unlimited from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then Jeanette's Pier is selling permits, but they too only sell them during business hours, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we're going to try and get the word out for a matter of convenience for folks that do want to drive on our beaches. But police I know is geared up and prepared because of that federal shutdown.
We may want to touch base with those shops as well and just let them know. I think I went to one at one point in time, and they weren't quite aware that they were supposed to be able to sell permits.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, it's a tremendous service they're doing for us at no benefit, really. I mean, they're not recouping, they're not getting any cost back. Just hopefully somebody's buying some tackle when they get the permit, I guess. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Commissioner's agenda? Mayor Pro Tem?
Not a thing, man.
I do. You recall that I had emailed everyone about well, actually I didn't. That was the other issue. Renee's not here. She was the only one that made a comment back to me on something else that I'm going to bring up, and that's since we were talking about just walking to school day, a sign. We have a school in town. It's called the Nags Head Elementary School, and it doesn't have a sign. You'd be amazed at how many tourists ask, "Don't you have a school here?" And I didn't really realize how important the lack of a sign was until some grandmothers approached me. And they take their grandchildren to school every day, and they feel strongly that a sign there on the bypass would not only help our visitors to know that we do have a school here, and we're very proud of that school, but that it may also help to let that driver know why there is a reduced flashing light there. And I don't know that it would, but anyway, when I talked to Cliff about this, I found out that there was a proposed sign on the site plan.
Yes, ma'am.
And Renee's comment back, and if you all commented to me, I didn't. I don't know that you did, but Renee's comment back was that she would like more information on where all these other schools got their signs, and I asked Cliff to also do that. So Cliff's got a little bit of information on the sign
Yes,
for
ma'am.
us to listen to.
The site plan is up on the board. The pink area is the road is the bypass here, and that's the turn-in going into the school off the bypass. And the school showed a sign, proposed sign here outside of the DOT right-of-way. So it wouldn't require an encroachment agreement, but we could get an encroachment agreement for this sign if the board chose. I spoke with Jim Weinberger, who's the head of school maintenance and construction for Dare County Schools. He said that he was the one that told me, well, we had one on there to begin with, but for whatever reason, we just either priced it out or just chose not to do it. He couldn't recall exactly why. The sign that was that's up at Kitty Hawk Elementary School, the other school on the beach that fronts the bypass, was paid for by the school when they were renovated. In addition to what Commissioner Sadler said, I think I don't think the school's going to put any money into this, but the parent-teacher organization might. And I think part of probably what you're hearing, and I have 2 kids that go there, so I'll hopefully, I'm not using that as a reason for what I'm about to say, but we have, with our district signs, I think we've created a sense of place. I think these signs help that. I know it's a nice to have. It's not something that we have to have, but it shows a sense of pride, a sense of place, and a sense of ownership that I know our public safety folks have really been striving to get with the presence. We felt so strongly about the SRO in the schools. Similar price to the district signs that we have. I think the Whalebone District, the Historic District, all those district signs that we've put up, if we were to do something similar to that, those signs were at a cost of $1,062, the 2-sided sign each. We just recently put up district signs, identification signs for Town Park and Satterfield Landing. They were about $1,450 a piece. So I think we're somewhere under the $2,000 ballpark range if we put signs up that are similar to other ones.
Okay. And I just would like to ask the board, actually I'm taking your temperature today of your level of interest, but I'm really surprised that we don't have a sign, I guess. And it's never dawned on me because I know the school is there. But when you drive by there, if it's your first time here, there is not a clue as to what that big building is over on the right-hand side going north. So I'd just like to ask the board, and if you feel there is, I think there's, I've looked for money. I think there is a little money left over in the rents from the CSI folks that, of course, you all know moved and left the community care clinic. But I also think that it's important enough to our community that if you feel like the money isn't there for the town to do it, that maybe the parent-teacher organization might want to see if they have funds to help. And actually, if this is something the board wants to do, because the signs we've put out there are great. I mean, that one coming right there at Whalebone when you're coming across, I mean, it just kind of sets the tone of Nags Head.
I'll jump in. I went over to the school, and there's a sign there that's on the school property. It's not out on the bypass, but it is has the little notifications. You can put messages on it, etc. So there is a sign for the school. So we're talking really about a second sign. That entrance is not one that they seem to use. I think it was one that was on the site plan, but every morning you go by there are cones across it. I don't think it fits into their traffic flow is part of the concern there. And I guess part of my concern would be, would a sign there make more people try and come in that entrance, which they really don't want you to do, it seems like. And the other one is, it is a nice to have, and if the school board wanted to do it, they had opportunity to do it. And I don't know that it's our place to jump in there and put an additional sign there. The folks that are going to school, I mean, you may have trouble finding it the first day if you're going to school, but after the first day, I don't think they have put so much problem. And the visitors, while it would be nice to have the visitors know what that building was, I just don't see it as being really an essential piece of it. So that's my 2 cents.
Let's just, I'm sorry. Let's just offer PT or whoever some assistance on the town's behalf to help them get a sign. Do it in a combined effort. First of all, the town of Nags Head dropped the ball right from the beginning. We should have made them put the sign in. It's part of site plan, but again, that was let's make a deal for that school, and that's what happened. So they cut all the avenues that they could. But we dropped the ball by not making them put the sign in. So let's help them put the sign in.
Well, I'm sorry, may I ask a question? If it's on the site plan where it says proposed sign, does that mean that they have to do that?
Was the site plan accepted like as is?
I imagine it was.
If the site plan was accepted, yes.
And usually you don't have to force people to put in signs. That's not a...
Is that not true? Or unless somebody in planning made a, or the manager. I mean, the ones that have it, can say no is the planning director and the manager.
If there are any changes to a conditional use permit site plan, it's considered in terms of minor or major. And the planning director is allowed to provide minor changes if it doesn't fundamentally change the overall plan. So if the Board of Education decided that they didn't need a sign there at some point, we wouldn't have held them to that sign for this purpose.
Okay. Still goes back to us.
Limit on 10. It's not
Mr. Welch?
Regarding the traffic flow, I do think a sign in that location would be problematic because it is closed off. That is not where their buses and their parents come in the morning. So it's closed off in the morning and it's closed off in the afternoon during school hours when the flashing light is on saying there's a school in the area to slow down. But so I think that location would be problematic. I also believe it really is a decision to be made by the Board of Education, not the Nags Head Commissioners, regarding the sign. There is a lovely sign in front of the school. All of the traffic flows into the school parking lots for drop-off and pickup on Wrightsville Avenue. The First Flight schools, you know, they're set back off the road similarly. I mean, we're closer, but there is a lot of vegetation there that really prevents you from seeing the overall building. So a wayfinding sign, perhaps, you know, at Bonnet Street would be appropriate, but I'm not sure that location is really appropriate for a sign. I think you may cause some confusion there, considering the entrance is blocked, because it kind of says, here we are, but don't come in. So I think the school system probably had their reason for not putting up the initial sign. I would favor going back to the Board of Education regarding the sign and what is appropriate and where they think appropriate location should be. And, you know, does the PTA want to help fund this sign? I don't think we can really dictate that either. But I think an appropriate location is really important. I don't feel like it's our decision to make, personally.
Well, I do feel too, Bob, that you said that the district signs, you know, we actually survived 51 years without those district signs. So it's just I think it's a feeling of how much importance you put on an area. You know, we certainly didn't go into Gallery Row and say, you know, hey, all you art studios in here, how about participating in the cost of a sign? I think it's more what the people who are in charge of the town, what values you put on the town, and I just feel that, and that entrance, by the way, is open, except for when school's going in and school's out. I mean, I've been in that entrance many a time and never had a problem. But, you know, if the school board would prefer the sign to be further north, like you said, up toward Bonnet Street, or it's just identifying that there is a school over there. And unless you go out and go around and go into the entrance of the school on the side street, you do not see that sign. I'm sorry, but you don't. And I
Don't disagree with that.
I just think that it's another, just like Satterfield, you know, the new sign we just put up, was it really necessary? Well, it just kind of shows people, hey, in fact, I think Perry White said something about it. It's nice to know that we're proud enough of that to put a sign that it's down there. So again, I apologize for not bringing it up when the school plans were being submitted and we approved. I am for putting a sign up. I'm for the town paying for the sign. I know the school board has no money, and when when teachers are actually bringing supplies to school in some of those grades for their kids, I am not going to ask the Board of Education for any money for a sign. So if the town, if you guys decide you're interested in it, you want to ask the parent-teacher organization to participate or not, I would support having a sign along the lines of what we've done for the other districts there. So that's, if you don't know how I feel, now you do.
Would, and I'm not sure whether you'd support this or not, but I was going to propose maybe if we wrote a letter to the Board of Education and asked them to reconsider putting a sign there. I could support that, but I'm not sure that that doesn't accomplish what you're saying, because it would require money from the Board of Education.
No, I would certainly, like Susie suggested, ask them, tell them that we are considering putting a sign there along the district signs, and ask them if they have a preference of where they would like it on the bypass, that we feel like that DOT will certainly give us that permission. But I would not agree to asking the Board of Education for any money. I would agree to writing a similar letter to the parent-teacher organization and tell them that we're considering doing this, and do you have any money to help us?
And perhaps I'm a little sensitive from being a former Board of Education member. I just feel like this board shouldn't usurp the authority of that board. So I think a letter, requesting, saying we're interested in a sign, and I mean, I think that's the appropriate way to go, from one board to another, not saying we're putting up a sign and here it is and this is what it's going to look like.
I agree with that. I mean, we don't need to usurp anybody's authority.
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't want the sign, then maybe we reconsider it. Then we come back
And it may just be a matter of money, and it's certainly affordable for us, but I just think there's a proper way to go about it.
Are you saying that you want to ask them for money, Susie?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm saying that I think we need to send them a letter telling them our interest and seeing, get their feedback on it.
In other words, ask them, do they have a preference of where, if we do this, is that what you're looking for them, from them?
I would say that we would like to see a sign, in front of the elementary school so that our visitors and guests and citizens know where the school is located, and just begin a dialogue with them and see what they say. And, if it comes down to us funding it and we all approve of the funding, that's fine. But I think they should have a say in what the sign looks like and where it goes, and, if the PTA wants to be involved in that process. But ultimately, I believe the decision is that of the Board of Education.
I'm sorry, the air conditioning went on, I couldn't hear you.
Ultimately, I believe the decision and the dialogue needs to be with the Board of Education.
I can follow that.
Do I hear consensus for writing a letter and maybe initiating that conversation? Is that?
As long as there's no asking them for money, I'm fine with it.
I think we can phrase it where we're interested in it, but we're not asking you to pay for it necessarily.
We might need to be real clear.
In the event the money does come from the PTO, they are holding their fall fundraiser Saturday from 10 to 3 at Nags Head Elementary School. It's
We
a
all need
pumpkin
to go.
festival. There will be many activities for families, and so go support your PTO this weekend at Nags Head Elementary School.
Well done, Mr. Ogburn.
Very good.
But I'll be happy to write that letter.
Thank you very
and
much.
initiate that
And I do
conversation.
appreciate the board's conversation and bringing out a lot of good points.
Anything else on your agenda, ma'am?
No, I hope my grandmothers are listening. I'm finished. Thank you.
I have two things on my agenda. The first one is to let everybody know that Wednesday, October the 9th at 7 p.m. is the League of Women Voters Candidates Forum, and that will be held here. And then there's a broadcast schedule for it. I believe it's the next, I'm going to ask Roberta on that broadcast schedule, though, if that's all right.
Thank you.
The GovEd on Channel 20, the Nags Head Voters Forum will be shown the Friday and Saturday following, what is that, the 11th and 12th of October at, on Channel 20 at 7 p.m. on Friday night and 7 p.m. on Saturday night. And it will also be posted to the Town of Nags Head's YouTube channel. I'm not sure exactly when yet, but we'll try to get it up there as soon as possible. And that is www.youtube.com/Town of Nags Head, one word.
Wonderful. My second item is, it concerns our recreation plan. And we created our recreation plan with a lot of good citizen input. And one of the things that we identified was the purchase of Dowdy's Amusement Park. It's a little under 5 acres. It was identified in that plan for acquisition. And the owner set a price of $1.8 million on it for the town to purchase it, with a stipulation that it be called Dowdy's Park. And I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with that purchase. I think it's an important piece of land for the town. The unique location beside the school and across from the YMCA offers a lot of recreational opportunities. And I think we should buy it. It's something we've talked about a bit, and I think it's one of those things where there have been concerns about we don't have a plan for it. And we don't have a specific plan for that land, but it is part of our recreation plan, and there will be lots of opportunities to decide exactly what to do with it in the future. But the problem with these big parcels of land is they're going away, and the number of 5-acre pieces in the town is minimal. There are just a few left. And I think this is an important piece, and I would like to see us move forward with that. And I'm going to make a motion to that effect, that we purchase the Dowdy's Amusement Park site for $1.8 million, and I'll let it lie with that.
I'll second that.
We've got a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Yes, there is. I think you made the remark that we have discussed this purchase a lot. I remember discussing the purchase of this property back when Bob Mueller was the mayor. And the money that we had then, obviously, the deal didn't work. And so that goes back a long time. But Bob, I think it's really inappropriate for us to take a vote today without Renee. Renee's been a big part of the discussion that we've had for months and months and months. And I just would prefer that you do this when she is here.
I understand what you're saying about Renee not being here, but I also feel like it's an important public issue. We've got a candidates forum coming up, and I think everybody should know where everybody stands on it.
Move to table.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second for tabling the motion. Further discussion on the motion to table? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Nay.
Nay.
The motion fails because of a tie. And we're back to the original motion. Further discussion on the original motion?
I'd like to say something. This is an opportunity, I believe, for our town. And while we don't have a specific plan, we do have the overall recreation plan, and this was listed as an opportunity within that plan. We have some land within the town with parks, but unfortunately, we're not able to utilize some of the park at Satterfield Landing. It's often closed, so our families and our older adults are not able to utilize that most of the time. This could provide an opportunity for all ages. I think we can develop something. I think we have people that worked diligently on the recreation plan who would probably be willing to help develop that, whether it's a track around, whether it's a ball field in the middle. I think the opportunities are really endless, and the price is very attractive. It's less than we have paid for properties in the past, and I fear that if we don't take this opportunity, we will lose it. And I try to envision what would be the worst thing that could be built on that site, and there are many things that would be very unattractive to our community there. So for that reason, I would support purchase of this piece of property. And the owner is, willing to sell, and there has been dialogue with the owner.
And I do not disagree with one word you have said, Susie, but I've also been talking to members of our community and have been reminded, and Bob, you brought it up, there is going to be a candidates forum because there's going to be a change of leadership on this board as well as the makeup of commissioners. We will have 3 different people on the board, possibly. Saying that, you can, and your plan is wonderful. We do need soccer fields, playground areas. There's not enough. But I'm also reminded that plans, like people, change. If you could tell me today that that piece of land would have nothing on it but perhaps a small municipal parking lot for the overflow that people can't find a place to park to go to the beach, and a large recreational area, if that is in concrete, I don't have a problem with that at all. But those plans that you make today can change with your future board, and believe you me, I thought, when somebody said that to me, I thought, yeah, because this board cannot tie to another board what we say needs to be on there. Going back to the other issue, again, this is very unfair for this board, these 4 people, to try to make a decision as huge as this without all 5 of us. I think, I just feel that it's not correct. So saying that, I may agree with everything you said, but I disagree with taking a vote today.
I don't believe we can truly develop the vision today, right here, and regardless of who is sitting here today or tomorrow, the opportunity exists today, and the opportunity has existed in the past, and there has been many, many years of discussion. This is the best price we have had on this property, and I feel that it may be snatched up in the near future. So I feel like the opportunity is now. I trust that whomever our citizens elect to sit here, they will do the right thing. They will form a committee to develop it with the vision of our community, with the vision of what our citizens
Well,
want.
maybe the
So-
mayor could go to the seller of the property and ask him for a 2-week delay since it's been on the market for 7 years. I don't think that's out of order, Susie.
Mayor Pro Tem?
My turn?
Yes, sir.
Well, for the last, gosh, it's been longer than 4 years, probably the last 8 years, they've talked about purchasing that piece of property. The price keeps going down, keeps going down. It is a good price. I'm not for taking that piece of property off the tax rolls yet. It is, if we had a plan, for what we're gonna do with the piece of property, not just give me recreational stuff, then there might, as I said before, we might be some consideration in it. We have gone into closed session many times over this, talk about this piece of property. And I'm just not, I think it's a good deal. I agree with all the stuff you said. However, I'm not ready at this time to cast my vote in support of purchasing that piece of property. Again, it's not that much farther till after the election, and then we can readdress it, if any of us are here.
That's right.
Well, I know I won't be here, so that is when it goes away.
Well, maybe your predecessor will be here and can vote for you.
With that said, I'm going to call a question on it. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
The motion fails 2-2. We did have a
It was,
request.
was a good try, though, Mayor. I got to
Hey.
give you all credit.
Well, and again, again, because she is not here, if you want to see if the seller wants to give you, Susie's word is going to be sold, right away, bring it back October, the mid-month meeting, if you feel that strongly. I mean, I don't know what, we all change our minds,
Well,
so.
I would appreciate the opportunity to do it because I do feel strongly about it. Mr. Leidy, you gave us a request for a brief closed session. Can you give us the general statute number for
Yes,
getting
sir.
advice?
Yes, sir. It'd be General Statute 143-318.11A3.
And I'm going to make a motion that we go into a brief closed session to receive advice from the attorney per that general statute. Second, is there a second?
Oh, second.
Further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. We're going to come back into open session after a brief closed session. I'm going to ask our attorney, Mr. Leidy, to report out from that closed session.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the board did confer with the board's attorney regarding the litigation that we entered closed session to discuss, but no action was taken.
Thank you, sir. We are going to recess to our mid-month meeting, which is October 16th at 7 p.m. So I hope we will see everybody there, and thank you very much.